You put them on silence or stun or whatever you care to call it. Of course, are there new members do we need to make any introductions?
Joshua, did you want to get this on? Yep.
Yeah, he did. I don't think there actually are any new members, but this might have been. Oh, George. Well, I think we did. This is the first time we've met in person. We did meet online when we added a bunch of new faces to the committee, so now you all get to at least see each other's faces. So, congrats. Just real quick, so I'm Shauna Madsen. In case you don't know me, I am the Deputy Chief of Fisheries Management. FMAC is one of the committees that I kind of help to manage. We're going to have quite a number of things to talk about today, looking at your agenda. And we've also done a little bit different of a layout than we've done in the past. Previously, we waited to take public comment until the end of the entire agenda. We thought that it would be much better to take public comment after each agenda item so that if the public would like to comment specifically on that topic, we're not rewinding, going really, really far back. So we've kind of reorganized things. Some of the things we have to talk about tonight are a new draft addendum for striped bass. That goes before ASMFC in 2 weeks. So if you guys have any feedback for that addendum, that's what we're here for, to kind of hear what you've got. We already had a public hearing. John was there. Thank you very much, John. Jeff, you were also there. But we still wanted to make sure that we're updating the committee on what's going on there. Then we also want to talk about the ever controversial February black sea bass season. Alexa will bring you up to speed on some of the information surrounding that, as well as recreational summer flounder regulations, because we did need to take a cut per the Mid-Atlantic Council on recreational summer flounder. So, and then we have some committee members that requested to talk about blue catfish regs, so that'll kind of be an open forum.
Okay. Do we have a quorum?
Yes.
Okay.
And on the phone, so everyone is aware, we have Ernie is online, Mark Sanford is online, and who else is online?
Mark Symes and Skip Feller.
Yes, that's right. Mark Symes and Skip Feller is also online. They couldn't make it in person, but they'll be here listening.
Okay. We have the minutes from the last meeting that we actually was a virtual meeting, January 25th.
Yep.
Anybody have any problem with the minutes on that? All right, sir. I guess minutes are okay. Motion to approve.
Also make it.
Second. Anybody disagree? Okay.
All right, looks like I'm up to talk to all of you guys for a while about draft addendum 2 to striped bass. I believe I've met all of you in person, but for some reason I haven't. I'm Joshua McGilly. I'm one of Shanner's fisheries scientists. I'm also one of the main point of contact for staff for FMAC, so you receive a lot of emails from me. If I have not, come on. There we go. All right, perfect. So to start off with, I'm just going to go over a really quick timeline of striped bass management coast-wide. The rebuilding timeline. This does not match up. That's really weird. So the benchmark stock assessment was done in 2019, where the stock assessment found that the stock was overfished and experiencing overfishing. Just to make sure that everybody's on the same page with overfished and overfishing for going forward. Overfishing just has to deal with the number of fish that's being taken out of the population and killed, and then overfish has to deal with the spawning stock biomass relevant to the target or the threshold, so the size of just the female stock. 2021 and 2022 measures were implemented to begin rebuilding the stock by the 2019 deadline, which was required in the interstate F&P. They set this 10-year guideline, or they set this 10-year deadline to rebuild the stock back to the target. The 2022 stock assessment update found that the stock is still overfished, but no longer overfishing based on 2021 data, which was the most up-to-date data at that time. And then the newest projections using 2022 data indicated a low probability of rebuilding by 2029 if the high 2022 fishing mortality rates had continued. This thing wants to fight me every step of the way, it seems. There we go. So for the 2022 striped bass coast-wide removal, so everything I'm going to talk about on this slide is coast-wide, bay, and ocean combined. The total striped bass removals increased by 32% in 2022 relative to 2021, looking at the number of fish, and this was driven by an increase in recreational removals. The recreational harvest increased by 88%, and the recreational live releases increased by 3% relative to 2021, still looking at number of fish. There was a large increase in ocean recreational harvest, likely due to the availability of the strong 2015 year class. In the ocean slot includes everything that is outside the Chesapeake Bay and the tributaries that drain directly into the bay. And then the total commercial harvest in 2022 was similar to 2021's, looking at the number of pounds landed for the entire coast. So there was concerns linked to the high removal, and projections indicate a low probability of rebuilding by 2029 if the 2022 fishing mortality rates continued. The board's concerned that the Amendment 2 measures combined with the strong 2015 year class will lead to a high catch in 2024. And the concerns that if the upcoming 2024 stock assessment indicates more management changes are needed, the addendum process will likely take too long to respond. And the draft addendum 2 was initiated to address these concerns and support stock rebuilding. So this draft addendum is building upon the emergency action that we put into place last year. So most of you are well aware of what was put into place, but the emergency action that was passed was temporary. That set in place a 31-inch maximum size limit for all recreational fisheries along the entire coast that had a slot limit above that 31 inches. It was originally supposed to only go for about 6 months, but in October of last year, the board voted and extended it for a year. So it is now effective through October 28th of this year, or until Addendum 2 is implemented, and whichever comes first. Draft Addendum 2 considers options to formally change the fisheries, the measures in the fisheries management plan. And there's proposed recreational and commercial options aimed to reduce the harvest to the fishing mortality target and are not designed to protect a specific year class. The emergency action was put into place with that 31-inch maximum to protect the strong 2015 year class. Most of those fish at that point last year, they were already at or above 31 inches for the most part, so it protected that strong body of fish from being taken out of the population. So I'm going to start talking about the draft addendum now, and the options we're going to talk about. The way that I'm going to do it is I'm going to go through everything up front, and then I'm going to go through each slide, each section, and I'm going to kind of see what the board likes for the different options. I'm happy to take questions, clarifying questions while I'm going through each slide, but then we'll go back and go through each one individually after everything's been gone over. So this recreational fishery.
I have a question for you, Joshua, if I may. That emergency action, the 31-inch, that applied to for hire recreational?
Yes.
And straight recreational, not for hire? Okay.
Yes.
Same for both? Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
So for the recreational management options, we're going to talk about the ocean size limit options and the Chesapeake Bay size and bag limit options. For the commercial fisheries management, we're going to talk about the quota reduction option that is on the table. And then options, will end with options for the response to stock assessment and allowing the board to respond more quickly to stock assessments via board action, which would be faster than the addendum process. So for the reductions that are needed, projections indicate a 14.5% reduction from the 2022 removals is needed to achieve the fishing mortality target in 2024. So this can be done one of two ways, where each sector takes 14.5% reduction, or if the recreational sector were to account for the full reduction and commercial took 0, then a recreational sector cut would be 16.1% to cover that full reduction. So to start off with the reductions that I'm going to talk about is the ocean. So there's 5 different options up on this table. Status quo is option A, which is the slot limit before the emergency action, which is 28 to below 35 for most of the coast. There were some differences in different states, but that would be mainly what it is. Option B is the emergency action slot size of 28 to 31. Option C is a mode split where their private vessel and shore anglers would have a slot limit of 28 to 31 inches, while the for-hire would have a 28 to 33 inch slot limit. Option D is back to a standard slot for everybody of 30 to 33 inches, and then option E is another mode split with the private vessel and shore angler having a slot of 30 to 33 inches, and the for-hire having that 28 to 33 inch slot limit again. All bag limits for all these options is 1 fish per person, and all except option A are the 2022 seasons. The third column, the one right next to the right, I guess your guy is still right-hand side line, is the overall reduction based on these new slots. And then the last 2 columns are the harvest change and release mortality changes. So next is the Chesapeake Bay options that are separate from the ocean. So there are a few more options for the Chesapeake Bay. Option A is status quo with the 1 fish at 18-inch minimum. And the season would be the same as 2017 or approved by any conservation equivalency that was put into place. There's 4 subsections of option B, all slot limits with the 19-inch minimum, and then the maximum changes anywhere between 23 and 26 inches. And then that bag limit would be 1 per person for all modes, and then the season would be 2022 season. And then there's 2 option C's, again, just varying slots with 19 to 23 or 19 to 24. But the mode split here, unlike the ocean, is a bag limit difference, with the private and shore angler having 1 fish bag limit and the for-hire having 2 fish bag limits. Next to the right, the red line, again, is the overall reduction, and then the last 2 columns are the harvest change and release mortality for those different options.
Your objective is still a 14% reduction.
14 and a half.
14 and a half is the target for.
If there's cuts on both sides. Coast-wide, yeah. So for the quota reduction options, there's really only 2. There's status quo, option A, which continues Amendment 7 quotas and size limits, which were the 18% reduction from 2017 levels. And this allows a continuation of existing Amendment 6 conservation equivalency plans. And then option B would be the quota reduction. They're not separating out ocean and bay like they're doing for recreational. This is just commercial, regardless of the area it's being caught. So the ocean and Chesapeake Bay commercial quotas would be reduced up to 14.5% from their 2022 quotas with their 2022 size limits. And the board would specify percent reductions between 0 and 14.5%. So this table up here, this is separate from the draft addendum. This is just showing our Virginia landings for the ocean and bay. So the second column, option A, which it's labeled as status quo or 0% reduction, the numbers would be the same, are the current quotas. Ocean is just over 125,000 pounds. And the bay for Virginia is just over 983,000 pounds. The middle column is option B. I'm only showing the maximum 14.5% reduction. The ocean would dip down to just under 107,000 pounds, and the bay would be just under 841,000 pounds. And then the last column for reference is the 2022 commercial harvest that you guys can kind of compare to where we would be. So the ocean, their entire catch for 2022 was just under 122,000 pounds. and the bay was just under 723,000 pounds. So if you kind of imagine the full 14.5% reduction, the ocean would have taken a hit of about 15,000 pounds, but the bay, we would still have been under by 118,000 pounds. So then the last thing is the response to an assessment. If an upcoming stock assessment prior to the rebuilding deadline indicate the stock is not predicted to rebuild by 2029, there's two options. Option A, which is status quo, which the board initiates an addendum or amendment to change measures, which we're currently in. This includes the public comment period with hearings and written comments. And then there's new measures likely not implemented until about 2 years later. Or option B would be the change, which is the response via board action to change management measures by passing a motion at a board meeting instead of an addendum, so it would be a faster process. This would have the public comment period only at the board meeting or written comments to the board before the meeting took place. And this allows a more expedited response to assessments, pretty much addressing any issues the board feels needs to be addressed at that particular moment. So that's all the options and all the background.
You left one out.
There's-
Flaying at sea.
So there's two technically that I've left out. The flaying at sea we have already addressed in our regulations. And there's also a for-hire clarification that's in that little 5-page thing. What's it? The striped bass addendum 2 options quick reference. It's the flay at sea, like I just said. We have already addressed it in our regulation. It requires attached skin to all fillets and the retention of all racks to make sure that fish meet the minimum size requirement. And there's also a for-hire clarification that would just address any issues or changes to how the captain and crew are viewed on a for-hire trip compared to the paying customers if a mode split is chosen. And I'm happy to take any questions about that. So I guess I'll open the floor to questions about any background information, and then we can run through each one. This really won't take a motion for anyone. I can just do a basic vote and just kind of see what the majority is on what people feel for the different options. For our board member, Pat Gear, who will be at the ASMFC meeting in a couple weeks. We would all like to know what the board feels about all these different things that are on the table. So, any questions to begin with?
I've got a background question. When we were here for the hearing, for the ASMFC hearing, I asked the lady what the stock size target was that we were after. And she said it was just slightly higher than the stock size after the end of the moratorium. Other people I've talked to say it's a 10% increase over the moratorium stock size, and other people have said it's a 25% increase over the moratorium stock size.
So do you know the exact measurement?
125%. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, I know it's somewhere just over 200 million pounds, I believe, for the stock size, and right now I think we were at 100 and something.
Target's 125% of the, what am I trying to say here?
94?
1995 is 125% of the spawning stock biomass as a target.
What would our situation be if it was the target size after the moratorium? How anybody can expect to raise 25% more fish than when we didn't fish confounds me. I just don't understand.
I can kind
Do
of,
you want to?
yeah, I can go a little bit. So this is something that the board did have the opportunity to discuss. I think the last amendment, if I'm correct, the board discussed whether or not we should be changing the targets and the thresholds, and whether or not those targets and thresholds were essentially unattainable. The board decided to continue with the targets and thresholds that we established back then, feeling that the stock was kind of imperiled, and they did not feel comfortable at that time changing the reference points kind of in the middle of the road. So I think that the board wants to revisit that in 2029, but at the time, because we were in the middle of this rebuilding plan, the board had a lot of discomfort with changing what that target was. But it was something that was considered. I think a lot of people had the same question that you do, Jeff.
This wasn't acted on, okay. I'll let somebody else go.
A couple of questions. You said the recreational fishery went over by 88% coast-wide.
It didn't go over, it increased.
It increased.
Yeah.
What did Virginia do?
Virginia, so it was much lower than the coast-wide. Our recreational fishery is.
Do we even have a coastal fishery anymore?
So the coastal fishery, our MRIP, it is very small if it does even exist. There is people that catch them as bycatch, but most of Virginia's striped bass fishery is within the bay, recreational.
I remember in the early 2000s where the ocean was just a parking lot.
Virginia was at one point 20% of the total harvest. We're down to around 4%. So
Yeah,
we've
it's
gone
just-
way down.
So I have trouble with coast-wide changes when that happens. First off, I think we should have a moratorium, is what I think, for 3 to 5 years until the fish come back. That's what I think. But it's not gonna happen.
Anybody else have any questions?
If not, I can start moving through.
Do we need to take the temperature of the panel to see if we've got to come up with a 14.5% cut? And if this is recreational driven that's gone over, should we,
But it's
instead
not
of
us.
making it recreational commercial, do we just jump and look at things that are 16.1 if that's where we got to get to? Because it seems that commercial should stay status quo.
So
because
really the way that I imagine, and Pat Shanna, please correct me if might not be the best route, I was just going to take kind of an overall vote, see how the committee felt as a whole about specific options. If it's split, I was just gonna note everything, and then really it then goes to the board for final consideration. We just wanted to see like how the different members felt about the different particular options. So we're not necessarily trying to meet 14.5 or 16 point, like not to get super heavy into the weeds
Right.
about these different options. And there's really no room either to kind of come up with new things. These are all the options that are going to be in front of the board.
And just
Okay,
real
Jeff,
quick,
I'm
so
sorry.
that we understand, the overall reduction can be paired with the other reductions. So we have the ocean reduction for recreational, we have a bay reduction for recreational, and then we have an overall quota cut for the commercial guys on the table. So the combination of those reductions, the board is hoping to achieve that 14.5% to the coast overall. However, we don't know, because there are so many options, what combination of options actually gets us to the goalpost. So the pulse that we're kind of taking right now is, how do you feel about these options that are on the table? And again, like Josh is saying, y'all might have differing opinions. You don't need to come to consensus. This is so that we can hear from you and so we can hear from the public, because we'll be going to ASMFC in a few weeks. So it's good for us to have all of that information available.
Mike?
So I'm a little, what you just said, probably a little bit, I'm still a little confused. So we're mixing commercial and recreational options together to try to achieve a 14.5%.
Yes, that's the end. That's
Is that how Maryland did it too?
Everyone has to do it.
everybody's all states from North Carolina to Maine are dealing with these same options on the table.
There's no more conservation equivalency because we're in an overfish status, and that was one of the things that went through with the last amendment. So everything that you see here, all of these options, are the options that the other states also need to adhere to. There's not gonna be any other changes.
Whatever the board
And,
votes on.
and then whatever the board votes on will be what applies to the bay, the full coast, and everyone's commercial quota.
So speaking from the commercial side, which I'm from, part of the dilemma we're in is, and it is not recreational from Virginia that caused this, it's the northern states that have put us in the dilemma of the 88% number with, for instance, the dead discards. And that is a penalty that Virginia, especially the recreationals, are paying for that overfishing in the northern states. The commercial side has faced penalties from two areas. One is the quota cuts that we have. I mean, we are probably down 40% since our original quota. But we also have a Mother Nature imposed cut in that last year, in 2022, we were only able to catch 73% of our quota, and that isn't really because of lack of effort, maybe a little bit of it, but certainly not 27%. It's because the fish aren't here. They probably have moved north. Because Maryland and the Potomac does not have nearly a 73% catch of their commercial quota. It's a much higher number. And does Jill know what the number is, what we caught in 2023 yet?
No,
Is it lower than,
It's not
or
done
is it
yet.
higher?
We're still waiting
we're
on
still waiting.
Yeah,
December report.
so when I mean two penalties, so not only have we been cut somewhere around 40%, and still, again, I know that the Virginia recreational guys have been hammered with one fish, lost the spring season, have no summer season, but we're also impacted commercially because the fish are leaving to go up north to colder water.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the science shows it. Every year, this percentage of what we're not catching of our commercial quota keeps dropping.
Right.
So I just want to, make that point.
Yeah, and we do, I mean, we hear you, Mike. Unfortunately, like Josh is saying, this is what the edict is from ASMFC, and this will apply again to all of the states and the entire coast. And so I think that was kind of the point of the last amendment, where the board decided if they're in an overfished state, you can no longer do conservation equivalency, because what you're talking about, for instance, is last time we had to take a cut, that was an 18% coastwide cut, but certain states were supposed to take a 40% cut to their overall recreational harvest because they were the ones that were harvesting the majority of. But when we look at it sometimes through the conservation equivalency lens, that means that state could say, we're gonna hit that 18% coastwide versus the 40% statewide. So that, I think, is part of the impetus for the board to say, when we're in an overfished state, we know that is the worst state for us to be in, so no more conservation equivalency right now.
Okay.
Jeff, I have a couple observations here about some of these options is if our intent with this emergency measure was to protect the 2015 year class, which is what, over 31 inches, 32 inches and larger, I think?
Yeah, so that was the idea that based off growth and age, the most of those fish would already be out of the slot.
Okay. And I see some of the options are to split the recreational from private vessel to for hire, and I'm not a fan of doing that. I'm not a fan at all of saying, well, for hire guy can get this, recreational, non-for hire guy can get this. Recreational anglers are recreational anglers. The customers on the vessels for hire are what counts, in my opinion. So when I look back at this other option about, for hire, my thoughts are the captain and crew.
I can pull up any
Yeah,
particular.
the captain and crew should not count, because I've got law enforcement in the back room, and I can ask these two gentlemen, how do you enforce a captain that has multiple trips in one day if he's allowed to keep a recreational harvest his first trip in the morning, and then the afternoon trip? How's that? It's not enforceable. You guys tell me if I'm wrong. It's unenforceable if the captain and crew are allowed to keep and retain fish for the customers, I'm assuming, but keep extra fish and bring them home. I don't think that should be allowed. That's my opinion. And so if we're taking looks at this 2015 year class, one thing I observed from looking at neighboring regulations is our commercial striped bass fishery does not have a maximum size. You can hire.
Only in spawning rivers from March
Right.
15th to June 15th.
But there's no,
Mesh size.
And mesh, yeah.
well, 7-inch mesh size, but you can catch up to 40-something inch fish in a 7-inch mesh size. You know, and if I look at the data from VIMS, you know, I can see fish up to over 1,000 millimeters, you know, caught in a mesh panel experiment or whatever. Well, my point is, why don't we, like our neighboring Potomac River and Maryland, have a maximum commercial size of 37 inches with some allowance for bycatch, whatever that should be, I don't know, but how would that help if they had a 37-inch maximum commercial striped bass with an allowable bycatch of whatever that should be? How
Yeah.
would that help with this reduction? Would it impact it?
I don't know if it would help with this reduction. What I can say is the original motion to initiate this addendum, part of that motion said, look into mesh sizes and maximum sizes on the commercial fishery versus an overall percentage of quota cut. When this went to the TC, it was incredibly hard for them to calculate how that would actually impact the commercial harvest. So they came back to the board and said, we think that you should go with an overall quota cut versus trying to figure out state by state how these mesh sizes or size restrictions would impact an overall reduction. It's just, it got to a point where it was far too complicated. The first iteration of this document, I don't know how anyone could understand it, frankly. So a lot of this was kind of cut back after they had conversations about how hard it is to discern how that would impact the overall 14.5% that we have to take for the full coast.
So what would they do then in the commercial sector is fish until you reach your approximate quota and you'd shut it down?
Correct.
Whatever
And
that
that's
is.
right. And so we
At whatever
operate.
percentage it comes out to be.
Exactly. So we operate on an ITQ system. So our overall quota is delegated to everyone who has a piece of that pie, essentially. So if there is a percentage cut that happens for the entire coast, that pie just gets smaller, and then it's delegated to everyone a little bit smaller. So that was the TC's recommendation moving forward. If the board wanted to see commercial cuts, that would be the easiest and most effective way to assure that that was what was taking place versus trying to put size limits or mesh size limits in place that they just weren't really sure how that was going to impact the overall reduction that we needed to take.
Well, I think the 7-inch mesh size is about the right size because the number of fish caught in it's pretty much hit it below 31 inches. It kind of gets them, but there's overages and underages, just, you know, and how they're caught in the mesh, don't know, but there are larger fish caught in the mesh. Hence, if there was a commercial maximum size like Potomac and Maryland, commercial gillnet fishery, gillnet only, that there should be an allowance for some bycatch. Because they will catch some in there, I'm sure, by you know,
That would be
snagged.
work for VMRC staff to figure out based on whatever
Right.
Virginia's total quota is. That's up to Virginia, that's not an ASMFC
Right.
action. And what we have here are options from ASMFC. And to change the options that we have here, that should have been done. All those discussions should have taken place a year ago. This is what we have to deal with.
Scott?
I was gonna say, if you go with a slot size on commercial, I think with the 7-inch, you catch very few big fish. You do get a few tango in it, but a lot of times they're gonna get, their mouths are gonna be kept shut, their gill plates are gonna be kept shut, so the fish is dead. So if you do that, all you're gonna do is waste the product by throwing it overboard. I don't think there's enough caught of those big fish to justify putting that maximum size on it to waste the fish.
Yeah, but with a commercial size limit though of 37 inches, it follows suit with, you know. 36, yeah. At 36, then, you know, yeah, there's that issue where they may snag in their mouth joints and their you know, gill rakes or their fins and things like that is most likely because they're not probably fitting through a 7-inch mesh.
Correct. So
But there are, based on the science, there are some larger fish caught in, but I haven't followed up with VIMS to find out, okay, how were those fish caught in there? But that would allow some, you know, some bycatch allowance to take in, so you don't waste those fish, but, you know.
When we did this in 2019, I'm looking at Mr. Aspinall over there because, some of you sat on the board back then, and how many, 11 meetings that year dealing with, where at that time they just said, come up with an 18% cut and handle it. They didn't give us any guidance. We looked at this a lot. We looked at these mesh sizes. We looked at the VIMS data. We asked them, we said, what sizes? Now, yes, you're going to get, for every mesh size, you're going to get a couple over or a few under. So we thought that the 7 and 9 were representative, that that would work, and that's what we went with back then. So,
It does work.
yeah,
That was
it does
7
work.
Bay, 9 Ocean.
Say again?
7 Bay, 9 Ocean, yes.
Yeah. And, it seems to be working. So it's, if we wanted to go with a maximum size, that's fine, but then we'd have to go ahead and put all the regulations in where it's like, is there gonna be an allowance for that? And then those things are law enforcement issues as well, so. But, the data that you're seeing from VIMS, that's what we used, as I recall. We talked to VIMS and they provided us all that data, and we looked at it every which way, back and forth, yeah.
A lot. So I
People
think
who say,
we've got.
we didn't get out of here until 10 o'clock,
I don't
11
think we
o'clock
can
during
imagine
this meeting, so.
the size. I think
No,
we're
we-
good.
So, yeah, I mean, we could do that, but I think what we did back then is working. It was
Kicking old-
meeting the goal of getting some of those spawning
We-
fish released.
And see how well it's working if they could get us the 2017, what was the bay catch in 2017 commercial? Is that number quickly available, 2017, 2018? That'd tell you right there.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, because we went.
Whenever we had a regulatory change, the commercial, in the commercial, whether it be quota or something, it dropped, you can see it, especially quota.
Substantially.
It drops right back down a
I
little.
recall when we did this, we looked at the average size of the commercial harvest, total pounds divided by number of tags, and there was a significant reduction.
no, way more than we were required to do.
Well,
I've been
just-
waiting 4 years to say this, but I'm restraining myself tonight because quite obviously, this is what we're here to make a decision on. I'm ready to make a motion. Some of these other things we're discussing, I respect the speakers and I believe they have a right to speak and, but they're really not an option here. What we have is what we have, right? To vote on and make a decision. I could sit here and talk for the next hour about the things we did in 19 and 21 that we didn't have to do. The springtime, and just to show I'm not a bad guy and I'm all commercial, the charter fishery in Virginia is taking a huge hit. No spring, no trophy season, and Maryland's had one for 5 years. But I'm gonna restrain myself and not go on about that. But the commercial side has taken more than we were required to do for 4 years now. So quite frankly, I'm not here to talk about any changes to the commercial, and nor am I gonna vote on that. I'm ready to make a motion. Can I make a motion?
No, he wants to go through this.
Okay.
And also to add, Will, PRFC and Maryland, they do have a different type of fishery. Most of their stuff is not gillnet. They do have, I believe, some drift gillnet, but their fishery as a whole is different than ours. We have much.
Yeah, it's a much truncated season that we have, yeah.
So
PRFC, I'm on PRFC.
I believe
Committee, and I'm a commercial.
you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but I believe most of their gillnet is drift gillnet.
No,
No?
drift gill nets are illegal in.
Okay,
Potomac.
then I'm
As a
wrong.
matter of fact.
I thought their fishery was very different
Yeah,
than
it's
ours.
so restricted in the Potomac with gill nets that you can't put a gill net anywhere you want. You have to negotiate with the PRFC staff to get a specific lat and long where you can put your net, and you have to go pay a fee administratively if you want to move your net to a different lat and long. And there's a specific distance we have to be from every other gill net, and we can't be near any pound nets at all. So, I mean, I got I have quota in Potomac, but I'm only allowed to have 2 gill nets. In Virginia, I could have 10 gill nets for the same quota and put them anywhere I want.
Then I was incorrect with that statement about PRFC.
All right, Josh, go through.
I'm also of the camp that the for hire fishery, it should be the same limit for recreational is.
So once we start moving through that, we can definitely go through those options and try to see where the board feels.
So I apologize
No problem, Chris.
for skipping there and wanting to move to the motion. So this particular portion of the discussion striped bass's question. So my question then officially is, what was the commercial bay catch in 17 and 18? And then maybe we can find out the price that we've paid already through the reductions we took, through losing 2 weeks, mesh size, all these things which show in your own graphs, even since 22, I believe it was, or what, yeah, well, 22, what we harvested versus our quota. You know, how much we're not catching. It's not because the fish aren't there, I can assure you that. It's because we have been hampered and handcuffed by regulations from 2019 and 2021.
Yeah, I pulled up old compliance reports. So, let's see, 2017, the bay commercial fishery harvested 827,000 pounds. And at that time, our quota was about 1.1 million pounds. That was 2017.
So what percentage is that?
Little under 80.
At the same place we are now.
And let's see, in 2018, it was 951,000 pounds landed, and the same quota in 2018, about 1.1.
I mean, I'm just, you know, just looking at those numbers, you can see not only we take a quota cut, but then we caught less fish, you know, and a lot of that is the result of the 2019, 2021 reductions and regulation changes. So I appreciate you. I hope that everyone can see that. You know, we paid our price. We paid our dues. And then some. I mean, way more than we were required to. Thank you.
Mark, if you have a question, you can unmute yourself and speak.
Yeah, I just got a general question. As far as the quota coast-wise goes for the commercial landings, is that being exceeded at all?
No.
So as far as coast-wide goes, for commercial, how far below is that quota?
That I do not know off the top of my head. For coast-wide. We're not sure.
I'll give you
I had to guess 60.
a percent lower. I don't think it's that low.
North Carolina doesn't. New Jersey does not have 60, 70%. 60 to 70%. Give us 1 second, Mark. We're trying to come up with a very rough estimate.
Don't we come close to catching the ocean though every year, Craig, we're right there.
Yeah, he's asking coast-wide though, like what is the percentage of coast-wide landings compared to the full coast-wide quota?
But as a whole, I mean, the commercial fishery is not exceeding the quota and has not exceeded the quota. Is that correct? For
That's
say
correct.
the past 5 years?
That's correct.
Okay. That would be the answer that I was
Okay.
looking for. All right, well, thank you.
No problem, Mark.
I mean, there's payback.
Alrighty. And Mark also, if there was any sort of overage for a commercial, that state would have to pay it back the following year. So if there's any other questions, or if not, we can keep moving.
Right. Yeah, I got to follow up. And, with that statement that you just made, as far as the commercial quota in Virginia, have we exceeded our quota in the last 6 years?
No.
It's more or less by design the way the fishery works.
Yeah.
Because you have the tags, and not everybody uses all the tags, by design, the fishery does not go over the quota. Which is great. I mean, as far as not going over the quota.
Yeah, it is a successful method that Virginia has where we have not gone over.
And
our
it sounds like
quota.
it's like 80% every year is kind of where they land. I mean, I would question how many people have tags who don't do any landings or sell their tags. I've always thought that would be a great conservation measure from some rich group. Buy up all the tags. But
Alrighty, so
I don't
yes.
I haven't won Powerball yet.
Ernie unmuted, he did raise his hand, but maybe just.
Yeah, Ernie, did you have a question?
All my tickets.
comment?
Yes, I do have a question. I looked over all the information and stuff. I don't, well, you all are coming and going some, and I don't hear very well. But the part that amazes me on anything as far as the questions go is, was the recreational ocean fishery, there's others along there, and yet none of them meet 14.5%, and then the commercial had no overage that doesn't have to be paid back, but it's the one, but it will be paid back. And we're the only ones making 14.5, and the Chesapeake Bay River is even worse. Their options are 20 and 16%. So I was wondering why in the world.
Ernie, we lost you. You broke up for most of that, Ernie. Would you mind repeating it?
He muted himself.
Ernie, do you mind repeating the question?
He tell him he's muted.
Hmm?
Tell him that he's muted.
Oh, you're muted too. Me. I know he told me his internet connection. Ernie, are you still with us?
He's there.
He's there.
He just won't unmute. Maybe he'll come back.
Okay.
All right, Josh.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that if Ernie's able to. So, come on. So again, we do not need to do any sort of motion or anything for these. I guess maybe the most straightforward way is I can present the options that we'd like to discuss. If you guys want to do a basic vote, I can jot down what either the majority is, if it's split, percentage-wise. If there's another sort of idea that the board would like to go about doing this, I'm open to it, but I feel that might be the most straightforward for each one of these sections. So the ocean rec, Chesapeake Bay rec, we can discuss about a percentage-wise for the ocean, or for the commercial, and then the final two things where it's status quo or the singular option. So if we'd like to move forward with that, then we'll start with the ocean recreational option.
So when we talk about the ocean recreational option, we're talking about coast-wide, not just Virginia.
Coast-wide, yes. Everything that we're talking about is coast-wide. PRFC, Maryland, North Carolina to Maine. They're all going on the same options that are being presented in front of you guys today. There's no sort of adjustment. There's no sort of conservation equivalency or anything. It's these options that are going to go in front of the board, which will then be voted upon. So if it makes it easier, I can go through and read through each one, or if there's one or two the board would like to move forward with that they feel is most.
Just start at the top and let's do it. I mean, the only thing this is gonna do is influence how Mr. Gear votes, correct?
Yes.
I mean, the options.
Pat is here to hear what the board wants to hear.
Public comment is
Yes.
closed. This is only to influence them.
Yes.
Start at the top, go through them, let's get it over with.
I like the idea, John.
So how many in favor of option B for the ocean recreational?
1, 2, 3.
Option B.
Keep your hands up. If
Yeah.
you're gonna
Option B.
Raise your hand high.
Aye, option B.
3.1.1, option B.
Almost everyone.
Yes.
Majority.
Yes.
And Skip and Mark also agree.
Perfect. Okay.
How many was that?
And Mike, 8.
I'd like to see the ocean closed in Virginia and that quota transferred over to the bay.
Close what? There's no fishery. Close what? There's nothing, Tom.
Yes.
There's no fishery.
I know.
Let's say that the options for recreational adds up to 12%.
Mhm.
Are you gonna look for the remainder from the commercial side?
That's a separate question.
It's separate.
That,
Or are they mixed together, or are they done
no,
separately?
so they're trying to bring all these different options, the rec sectors and the commercial, to get the whole catch down 14.5%.
Commercial and recreational
Yes.
combined.
Yes.
So,
Ocean, Chesapeake Bay, rec,
so
and,
I would be reluctant to vote for, say, option A, thinking, oh my gosh, if the recreational doesn't add up to 14.5.
yeah.
Then-
Option A, status quo, is usually not really a consideration. It's just kind of where we're building off
Just trying
of.
to look out to protect the commercial but keep the recreational as hefty as possible.
Okay.
I-
So option B, we came to a consensus that everybody voted for that. So do we feel we need to even discuss any of the other ones? Okay, perfect.
C,
See, what's,
I didn't vote.
Then I guess
I'll go with C.
C. Okay. Ocean.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Are you going to ask the people online also,
They raise,
or
you
not?
can use the raise hand.
Oh, you can use the raise hand. I'm sorry. You guys can also unmute yourself and vote.
Yeah, I'm for option D also.
Option. Okay. Thanks, Mark. Okay.
Option B.
That's the other mark. You voted. I got it.
Okay. We had yours jotted down with the hand raise. So either if you guys want to use the hand raise
Okay.
motion, or you can unmute yourself.
Ernie is also unmuted right now.
Hmm?
Ernie is
Oh,
unmuted.
Ernie, are you there again?
I'm trying to be here again. We'll see. Y'all
Much-
keep coming and going. It's probably reception down here.
Much clearer this time.
Okay. My question was before, and evidently now you're on to discussing the stuff, was, we know the problem was from New Jersey north in the ocean. That's where the 88% come from and stuff. But none of the overall reductions meet the 14.5%. The only ones that meet it is the commercial, which had nothing to do with the overage. And the Chesapeake Bay is even more extreme on the recreational side, 16 to 21%, and they had nothing to do with the overage.
So
I guess
again,
we're being
looking
forced
at
to pay
the
for the Northeast.
overall reduction numbers, all those would be combined to try to get to that 14.5% coastwide, with all those three different areas coming together.
Yeah, you're right, Ernie, we're carrying the load again.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm gonna have to respectfully disagree because we know that if you have to go from 14.5 to 16%, that means that the commercial, the whole thing isn't but 1.5%. So, we'd have to make our 14.5, so basically we're volunteering our reduction to help them so they don't have to reduce. Is that what you're telling me?
It might work out math-wise that way. Yep.
All right, well, thank you very much. That's the way I definitely look at it because, we weren't part of the problem. Chesapeake Bay wasn't part of the problem. Our reduction is just to help the people who caused the problem, not to have a bigger one. And we all know that the National Marine Fisheries Service was handling the ocean fishery for recreational, been closed in a number of years, quite a number of years. They had closed seasons because of it, so.
No, nothing new, right, Ernie? We've been doing that for flounder for
Thank you.
20 years.
John?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, doesn't section 3.2.1 of this draft addendum give them the option to leave the commercial quota alone?
Yes, it's anywhere
So
between
why
0
do we
and 14.
keep going over this? That's a different question.
that's one we're gonna talk about later.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, we
I'm
do
getting
feel
to
we should
the-
just leave the commercial
Get
status
there.
quo.
No, you can do that.
One vote away from it. Next.
Alrighty. Yes. Now, Bay. I guess what I'm just going to jump over option A, or Chris?
Yeah, I'll tell you option B3, and I'll tell you why. Because even though it only does 12.1%, if you look at the release mortality, it is not as bad as some of the other, it meets in the middle. Hopefully they'll take that into consideration. And so that's why my suggestion would be option B3 for the next round of voting for
So-
Chesapeake Bay options.
So a question to staff is, if we go with option B3, are they going to lower the minimum size in Virginia?
No?
I got a no over here, I got a shaking head
Well,
yes
because
over
it's,
here.
right now we're at 20 inches.
Yeah,
Well,
We-
we have to adhere to whatever option is put there.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it would go
No, we
down.
would-
We have to adhere to whatever option is put in there, unless we decide to be more restrictive, but the point that Chris was trying to make is sometimes when you're more restrictive with that slot limit, you watch those recreational release mortalities increase.
That's right.
So you have to kind of balance that.
You're getting the most bang for your buck at a B3.
So I-
Hopefully, Pat can, Mr. Gear can sell that a little easier.
Well, it was also,
do that.
it was important to me that something be consistent in the Chesapeake Bay,
Right?
okay? We weren't gonna get seasons similar, because it's just, we're too far apart. This is a start, at least if we have a slot limit that's the same throughout the bay, at least that's a start for having consistent measures between the jurisdictions.
Yeah, right now between the three jurisdictions, size, bag, and season, there's very, very, if at all, any consistency.
Isn't Maryland 18 inches?
19. PRFC and Maryland are both 19-inch minimum.
Did we vote?
Not yet.
I want to give you a different perspective, since I'm representing recreationals. I want to go with the most conservative option that's up there. I do want uniform measures throughout the bay, therefore I'm for B1.
Okay. I guess the easiest way, since we have two up on the, I'm just gonna go through at least the B options. We'll start and then we'll see where we are by the time we hit B4. So if you'd like to raise your hand for B1. Right. And again, if you want to raise your hand online or unmute yourself, that's the best way. B1 is 1. B2?
I got a question.
Yep. We hear you, Mark.
The size limit in Maryland, the size limit in Maryland right now, what is that?
19 to 31.
Okay, that's, okay, all right,
Sorry,
thank you.
B2 again, we do B2 again.
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna revote on B2. So please raise your hand.
Is that 4?
Yep. 5, 6. Okay.
Okay, B3 is.
B3. Okay. 2.
Plus 3 online.
B4. Don't believe that is everyone, so we'll move into voting for C1 and C2. So C1, this is one of the mode splits. Okay, or C2. Okay.
You should put that differently. There is no support for the.
That's what we're gonna jot down. All right, do we have anything else that we wanted to add about the Chesapeake options before we move on? Sold. Okay, now we are going to move into the commercial quota. Again, like John had mentioned a few moments ago, the board is considering 0 to 14.5%. So 0 would be exactly where we are right now, status quo pretty much, up to 14.5% or anything in between.
So earlier you did a slide that showed that if we took a 14% reduction, still not, the commercial fishery would still not exceed their actual harvest last year.
Yeah, do
Just last year.
Just last year.
that was just 2022, but would you guys like me to put those numbers back up? If not, I can just leave it on this slide so we can focus on two options. I guess the easiest way that I think, or I imagine, is we can start with a vote for 0, and I guess a vote somewhere in the middle, and then 14.5. We feel that that's something that we can work with.
We just voted on 2 recreational limits. One was 14.1 and one was 15.9, was it?
Yes, option B2 had the highest votes, so we're at 14.1 and 15.9.
Okay, so what would that average out and leave you for the commercial?
Somewhere.
14.5%.
The problem
something
is
less.
it's hard to just kind of pull an
yeah.
average because they're not weighted the same.
Yeah, that's
Again,
why I
the
asked
board
you,
isn't gonna
the
know.
biologist, to.
The thing is, like, we don't really know what all of these options in the end is going to work out to be. Whatever the board ends up voting on, what the final reduction will be. So, I guess let's start at 0%, and we can move they're 7 and 14.5. So please raise your hands for 0. Anyone online?
I'm sure Sanford is.
Yeah, it's me. You know, I don't think that commercial needs to take a reduction based on the fact it hasn't exceeded whatsoever here.
It's not exceeded, the fish are,
Yeah, you're
It's-
talking
we're
about fish you never
overfished.
caught.
we're overfished. It doesn't matter who did what, we're overfished, we need to do
Ernie's also.
something.
Okay, Ernie, did you want to speak?
Oh, and Mark also just, so. 8. We have 8.
Yes.
Gonna do another
Like I
great
say, I'm
job.
having bad internet service, but we want 0%,
Okay.
if you can hear me.
Yep, we can hear you, Ernie. Thank you.
We also got Mark's.
And Olga,
Thank you.
He's on option B at 0.
and also, what is it? Mark,
How many was that?
8.
8.
That's right, Mark Sanford,
Yeah.
0% against commercial fishery.
Perfect, thank you. So John, instead of me just status quo and 0% really are the same thing. 0% from 2022 is.
So you're asking under option, you're asking for people in support of option A now? Is that? Essentially, yes. Or option?
Yeah,
B?
option A and 0% reduction would be the same thing.
All right, but this group is not gonna decide whether it's 0 or 14.5. That decision's gonna be made at ASMFC.
Correct.
So our vote should only be for option A or option B at this table. Is that not correct?
Since I'm gonna be there, I think you've seen how some of these votes go when they say
Yeah.
0 to some value. So, you know, it could be anywhere in between.
There's a chance.
It could be anywhere in between, it could be anywhere in between,
I'm just trying to clarify, what, are so we've already ruled out that this board does not support option A?
Option A and 0% really are the same thing. I can reword
No,
it where.
no, because option A allows the continuation of conservation equivalency.
Which is what the 2022 commercial.
It would remain the same.
I can
Yeah.
would the board like me to reword the vote?
If it makes them happy.
I'm just trying to figure out what we're doing, so.
Option
Yeah,
A, option A is no increase, no change in the commercial
Option
quota.
A is no change and continues conservation equivalency.
Option
Option
B
B
is
gives the
up to.
the Striped Bass Management Board at ASMFC the option to reduce the commercial quota somewhere between 0 and 14.5%.
Yes.
Is that not correct?
Yes,
I just want to
It
make
does
sure I
away with
understand.
conservation equivalency.
yes.
So I'll just tell you, I do not support option A at all. I support option B for your record.
Do you think it'd be best if I had a vote for? Okay. Same thing? Okay.
No, that's fine. I mean, like I said, during the meeting, it's gonna go back and forth. Somebody's gonna make a motion for 0, someone's gonna make a motion for 14.5. It's gonna go back and forth, and we're gonna reach some
Been
point.
watching this fishery die for the last 15 years. It's so frustrating.
But, you know, that's what's gonna happen on this.
All right. so
That's my guess.
Then we support option B with 0%. Is that what you're looking for us to say?
No,
Yeah.
I'm
Looking for your
I'm
opinion,
trying to
John,
get
that's it.
An
I
opinion
think-
from, speaking
Okay,
here.
so the vote that we just had, I believe, was for
For 0%, which
0%.
is pretty much
which is
exactly
not-
status quo.
Not the same.
Because it would leave
thing
us in the
as status
same
quo
exact
because
place.
Status quo has conservation equivalency in it.
And you said by being overfished, that's off the table, is what
Yes.
he's getting at.
Right, and if that's off the table, what you just voted on was option B's.
Anything, I believe anything that's in place with the commercial fishery, season size limit, will stay exactly the same. So 2022 quota, status quo is exactly where we were with 2017 with conservation equivalency. 2022 with 0% is 22,
It's also
Quota
going to leave
still.
all the other states with the option of keeping whatever size limits they had in place.
Yes, the same here.
That's the problem with conservation equivalency. It is not uniform across the states. We're
Yes.
trying to get something that is uniform across all of the states.
I guess also to add, would anyone like to vote for option A? We can, since I overstepped just in right into option B.
You're so right. 0% and option A are the same. Because the thing with the commercial fishery is that's a quota-bound fishery. So whatever was established for that fishery in order to stay within that state's quota is allowed to continue. If you vote for 0%,
But
same,
if
same.
we're trying to protect the 2015 year class,
I understand. There is nothing in this document that does
on
that
the commercial side.
at all.
Or the recreational.
For the commercial, no.
Recreational size
The
does by
size
size
limits for
limits.
commercial and everything else the size limits for commercial will not change. This is literally a reduction of their quota. There was already in that document something that did either size limit changes for commercial fishery or the mesh size changes that Will was discussing. A vote for 0% in option B is the same as option A.
I disagree. I respectfully disagree. Option A, if we leave it in place, there were 40-some conservational equivalency plans that went into effect to get to where that was several years ago.
That doesn't mean for the recreational.
Beg your pardon?
That does not mean, what they're stating right there allows continuation of existing addendum conservation
No, we're talking about the
equivalency plans.
commercial side.
Right. We're talking about the commercial side. So they're allowed to do whatever they want within that realm to keep to their quotas. There's nothing in the document that changes the size limits for commercials.
All right. I guess now, if we want, we can vote for pretty much smack dab in the middle, a 7% reduction. Instead of going through all these crazy numbers, if we want to do a vote for 7,
Well, I mean, option B is somewhere between, I would say 0, but it's some variance between 0 and 14.5%. Vote on it as it is and let the math work out later in that what it should be, but it's not 0. It's basically, it's got to be greater than 0 and up to 14.5%, the way I would word that. Because you have an option for 0, and you have an option for, I would say, cross out, put a, 0.1 to 14.5%. It's something more than 0, not to exceed 14.5%. That's where I'm at. That's how I vote.
Okay, let's just do it that way, Josh.
okay, so we'll go with that idea. So we just did 0. Then we'll just jump to
Something more than 0.
something more than 0.
But not more than 14.
But not over 14, yeah.
Okay, who's voting for that?
Do we want to throw out a number, I guess, before, or do we want to just do above 0? Okay, fine, then above 0.
Josh, you started.
I know.
Is that 4?
1, 2, 3, 4, yes.
Let's make a deal.
Yes.
Okay.
So above 0%. Alrighty.
No?
I believe they all had all voted already.
Yeah, skip it now, but that's fine.
Any other mentions and things you would like to bring up about this before we move on to the last thing?
I think the board should discuss what it's gonna take before they say it's so bad we're gonna close the fishery. Have a moratorium. I think they should think about that now because it's gonna.
Let's think about that as homework, and maybe we'll bring that back to the next meeting.
No, this is for SMFC.
The last 3 or 4 weeks of fishing have been spectacular, like nothing we've seen in 7 years. So that's from Annapolis to here, incredible.
15, including PRC and DC. Mark, did you unmute yourself? Want to add something?
Yeah, because we can't see the vote, can you give the numbers of the, question, I guess, of who voted, percentage-wise, the first vote how many, and the second vote how many?
Yeah, I can supply, I can send those over. Do you want them right now, Mark? Just since you're not the.
Yeah, 5 people voted the first time and 4 people the second, or, that'd be fine too.
Okay.
Just a tally on.
Did you want that for all of them?
Why don't we recap at the end?
Yeah, that's what I was going to do.
But as we move forward, I'd like to hear
Okay.
which one passes.
We have one more, Mark. the response to the assessment, and then I can just go through everything. Does that work?
Yeah, that'll work.
Perfect. All right, so the last thing is just the response to assessments. So option A is the status quo, where the board initiates an addendum and amendment, and that is up to about 2-year process. Or option B is the response via board action, more expedited, with public comment being limited to before the meeting and during the meeting. So this one will be a lot more streamlined. Please raise your hand for option A.
It's gonna be a lot of source.
1, 2, 3, 4. Anyone online?
3.
So 7 for option A.
Wow.
Option B.
I'm just trying to read, I mean, it's pretty quick. I should have done my homework a little bit more, but yeah.
5. Anyone online?
No.
And then 5 for option B. Okay.
I want to get it today. Sorry, I'm reading through.
Tell them we got it.
We got it. Okay. So just to go over the votes really quick for the people that are not here. Ocean, it was 14 for B, and then C was 1. For Bay, recreational, there's 1 vote for B1. There's 6 votes for B2. There is 5 votes for B3, and Tom asked that I mentioned that there was no support for C1 or C2, the mode split. For the commercial quota, we had 5 for 0%, and then 4 for above 0% reduction.
We had 8 for online people for the.
8 for 0%. And then the response to the assessment, 7 for A, 5 for B. All right, is there any last comments that anybody would like to make before we move on to black sea bass? Oh, public comment.
Just public comment, if anybody has anything to want to add.
Yes.
Anybody in the public want to comment on this, what we just went through? You can come up and give us your name and who you represent.
Gentleman Danny Biden's my name. And I'm commenting now that we're closing the barn door after the cows got out. But I've got to say this. I'm a commercial fisherman, so I have my prejudices. I'm trying to look after my livelihood. I have friends who are recreational fishermen. They want to go out and have a good time. None of us in the Commonwealth of Virginia here have attributed or contributed to this overage. And the thing of it is, and the AFMSC does not want to address this, that where the guilty parties are at. Now, I'm a Christ follower. That means I'm to take and look at Jesus as my example here, and what I do, how I conduct my life here. But I guess right now I'm seeing I'm also being crucified, except for the sins of others, just for the sins of few people. Now, if they're really serious about addressing this, go to where the problem's at. That's who should be held to task here, not someone who has nothing to do with this. Because when I sit here and listen to stuff here, and listen to what is said from the states up north here, it's like I've gone back in time to 1867, and Reconstruction is going on all over again here in Virginia, and you have the heel of all of these North and Mason-Dixon line states against us down here. And what is it? They are jealous over us perhaps here because we've got something that works? Or they just exalt themselves so much there that they want to take and believe that they are above reproach here. That's how I feel about it. I don't know what's going to happen here. And I don't want to ruffle any feathers here, but I'll tell you this too here. I'm one of these ones here who's always held up and saying, all right, buddy, you commercial guys, that's it. By someone who claims they have whiter roads than I do. And yet when I see boys get busted home, they're recreational fishermen here, and this has happened just recently here with undersized fish here. When you have people going outside the 3 mile line, catching fish, which is illegal commercially, and claim to be sportsmen, and then turn right around and throw those same fish overboard here when the Coast Guard approaches them here. Should we and how should I put this? Should we uphold them as models? Or should we look at what's really going on here, just self-indulgence here on some people's parts here? Thank you, gentlemen.
You're welcome. Appreciate it.
To staff, I think it's important that this committee, and we're a committee, not a board, by the way, keep calling us a board.
I'm promoting you.
Yeah. That I think it's important that before we vote on things, that would the public be permitted to talk and about that issue. I'm not go off on tangents, but we discuss it and then just before the vote, the public talks.
Yeah, I would like to say one thing to the gentleman who just spoke. Having served 2 years on the commission as an associate commissioner, I'll tell you that when violators have been brought before the commission, they've been dealt with appropriately and I'll say to almost the full extent of the law in almost every case. I can tell you in 2 years, maybe a dozen have appeared before the commission, and I think only 1 or 2 got anything less than the maximum that's allowed by Code of Virginia. So when they're brought to the commission, the law enforcement has done their job, the criminal courts have done their job, and then it appears before us, and we take it very seriously. So.
You know what? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Let me just add that we need to police ourselves. We had commissioners, even a commissioner on the VMRC told us years ago that when he caught his record, it's a limit of fish, he would keep fishing, and if he got a bigger one came out of the cooler and went overboard, and his newest one just went in the cooler. And I've had recreational fishermen tell me about filling up their limit and going to people's docks and dumping them in their coolers, and then going back out again and getting another limit. And I've seen commercial people that have been just as dishonest. We need to police ourselves, and we need to bring those to the police. Thank you.
And just looking up the guy's name here, just to support another thing that gentleman said about the disparity and what's happening in New York. I'm trying to find the Instagram of this gentleman, and he's not doing anything illegal, but it's just amazing. The boat's name is Double D Montauk, or it's called the Double D or B or whatever. But they started in May, and they hammered rockfish May, June, July, August, September. And the 2 fish, back up a little bit. Oh, phone's doing it. I got you. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I was trying to look up that, but you're right. I mean, and hammered them all summer long. I'm not talking about, it's 6 person plus the mate and the captain, just unbelievable. Self-admitting that it was a good fishery, operating within the rules, but then when they implemented the emergency action, that slot, the amount they killed, the amount that were released, mortality, it's just unbelievable. The numbers that are being hidden, of what they're killing up there and release mortality, and the amount of fish they're harvesting versus, we have no fishery in the ocean anymore. And the bay fishery is nowhere, but so anyway, you're right on a number of things, sir, and appreciate your comments.
Alrighty. Thank you all for your time. As long as there's no other public comment. Now, are you?
Good evening, everyone. I think I've met everyone in person. If not, I'm Alexa Galvan, one of our fisheries management planners, and I'll be covering the next 3 items on the agenda. So first up, we have the February black sea bass season. So you all got an email from Josh through me in November talking about a public opinion poll we were going to put out asking about the February black sea bass season. It's been a pretty popular season. We've had since in 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, and then last year in 2023. You can see 2023, our harvest was more than double what it was in any previous year. But I started to hear from some people who didn't participate, some people who did participate, that they might not be in favor of continuing it because of the effect it had on the regular season. Because part of the February black sea bass season is that in order for us to have it, this is a season we have to ask permission for, we have to pay back anything we catch in February. So typically we've done that by closing days. So we said, let's go to the public, put an opinion out. Is this something they wanted us to pursue this year?
So one quick question on this number. What is the total harvested target? So they did 37,000 pounds. Is the total annual, what you're trying to target to 100,000 pounds, 300,000 pounds? I mean, just so we know the number.
We don't have a target. It's open for February, catch what you can.
But then you close it in the summer for a certain number of days based on the harvest.
Yep,
The
so,
math to do that.
so everyone who participates in the February black sea bass season has to report to us.
That's
They report in numbers of fish. We have staff who go out and measure fish, and they say the average weight was this per fish. That's how we got to, I think it was 38,000 pounds. And then in previous years, what we've done is said, based on MRIP, the daily harvest rate in, say, June was this many pounds per day. Therefore, if we close this many days, it will account for 38,000 pounds.
okay, so according to MRIP, what was the harvest in pounds last year total? So I'm trying to figure out if this is 10%
We don't know 2023.
or 2022.
So he's wondering what the RHL is, but we don't do it state by state, so give them.
What's a recreational harvest
Don't
limit?
have a, yeah.
Yeah, so
It's not
I mean,
I might be able to save you some time. I've talked to a couple of the people who practice this fishery in the spring, and nobody that I talked to wants to do it again this year.
okay.
So, is there anybody on the board, anybody in the audience that would like the February fishery to continue?
Yes.
Here, let me step through a few more slides, and then we can get to the
I thought
discussion.
we already found out. That's where it's
So
going.
we had the public opinion poll. Do you support opening a permitted recreational black sea bass season in February 2024? Please keep in mind that a February season would result in a harvest payback that would require closing days during the regular season. We had 420 responses. We had two different answers for yes. Yes, I would like the season to be open, full stop. And then yes, I would like the season open on weekends to kind of control the harvest and therefore have a smaller payback. So if we add those two options together, 50.2% of responders said yes, they want a season, and 49.8% said no. So we were pretty split down the middle. So, I mean, if we had 90% of people saying no, we don't want it, that would have been a pretty clear indication. But since it was so divided, we are bringing it to the commission, letting them make their call. We're bringing it back to FMAC. If you have recommendations you want to add in, we can do that. And I did want to add on this slide that the 2024 regular season, which would be reduced if there's a February season, is May 15th through July 15th, and then July 27th through December 31st. So that break in there, the July 16th to July 26th, that was to achieve a required 10% coast-wide reduction we had to take last year.
In the 2022 season, where we didn't have a season, we closed 20 days early in December. Is that correct? Yeah,
Yes.
we closed 20 days, and I think Maryland did the same thing. They closed 20 days early to make up for the 10% federal mandated reduction, which we have this year. So there will be a closure, that closure, if that's what you're proposing. But
So Delaware, Virginia, and Maryland, we try to vote together as the southern region. We don't have to, but we try to.
Right.
So yes, that was the decision we made because we had to take I think it was a 21% reduction that year.
And I
And that
noticed
was why we
Maryland,
didn't
and I noticed
open.
Virginia, we did the same thing for
Yeah.
that year alone. But last year, my observation is why I think so many respondents said no, is because the FMAC and the commission was faced with one option, either close for 31 days or close for 33 days last year, or this past year. And I don't think that's the right answer for the commission to deal with in the future. We should have an opportunity to look at early season closure in December, late season open in May, mid-season closures, because that's what other states, you look at Maryland, they did an early season closure and have the sea bass season. New Jersey, I think, did 2 mid-season closures, open late, and 2 mid-season closures. There's options that the commission should have when they vote on this later this month. They should have all of the options available so that we don't take 30-plus days at one time.
So the
Nobody
commission is
wants
not
that.
making that vote this month. They're not discussing any closure for black sea bass at this time. They will only discuss a closure if we open the February season, then they would hear it in April. There's no required
I know
reduction
if-
this year because ASMFC typically works on a 2-year
We won't know until the
period.
end of March, early April, what that payback is. And we should talk about the options to consider a February season and get public comment, if anyone here to talk to it. Talk about it before we end up voting on it, is my point.
Yeah, so let me walk you through the timeline. That gets a bit into this conversation. So on January 23rd, the commission is gonna vote whether or not to have a February season. If they do vote for it, then the season will open February 1st, run through February 29th. March 15th, final angler reports are due. And if anyone has participated before, you know there's sort of a double reporting. You have to call into operations the day of, so we know you're out, and we can coordinate with our sampling staff. If you come in with fish, they can get some average lengths and weights on them. And then you also have to report either on paper or online how many fish you caught for each trip. And if you're reporting one and not the other, then you're getting a call from me saying, hey, still need your reports because we need to have those final numbers for the year. Fortunately, it's a small enough fishery that I can call everyone. If this was the cobia fishery, that would be unheard of. So we'll have those numbers in March. In late March, staff will bring closure options to FMAC. If there's no other matters for FMAC to hear in March, we can hold a virtual meeting, since it will be a much shorter meeting and not everyone will have to drive here. We have done this in the past for single topic meetings. And, I definitely do hear you on providing more options. Then in April, staff will present the final option to the ASMFC Technical Committee and then the board for their approval. They have to make sure that we're closing the correct number of days to account for our harvest. And then at their commission meeting on April 23rd, the commission will vote on that regular season. If the commission does not decide to open the February season, then the 2024 season will remain May 15th through July 15th and July 27th through December 31st. So I can take any questions, or if the committee wants to discuss, you can do that.
I have another statistical question for you, but you're probably not going to be able to answer it now, but in the future, how many angler trips happened in February? Angler trips, so 6 people on a boat, that's 6. As compared to not reported trips as vessels, right?
Yes.
As compared to directed trips during the rest of the season. I'm trying to get a feel for a cost benefit compared to from one option to the other. If by closing 15 extra days in the summer, you're going to impact 5 times as many angler trips, then it
So this is your answer here under the total anglers column. So that had added up the number of reported anglers from each trip.
Right, but what you don't have here is, and MRIP probably does, the directed angler trips during the summer, during the regular season. It would be useful to know if it's, we're talking 1,400, and that's anglers, not, is that angler days, or is that anglers?
That is on.
Individuals going multiple times count as one?
Yes, because we don't know who's going out. You know, a boat can go out with 6 people, 6 of his best friends this day, and the next day he takes 6 of his other best friends.
So
We
this
don't
is
know.
angler days?
Correct.
Okay.
That's a good idea, though, and I will make a note of it. Skip, you want to make a comment or a question?
Yeah, if I can. So the reason that we're against it now, it's really just gotten out of hand. You know, back in 2019, basically when Rick Robbins did this for us, there's only a few boats doing it, and you know the payback wasn't a lot. Now everybody and their brother that has an outboard is a charter boat, and it's really gotten out of hand with the payback. And last year, you saw the numbers. Last year, it was pretty, and every year's different. You know, this year it might be like it's been now, where you know you don't get out a whole lot of days. Last year was pretty. There was a ton of boats out there every day, and you know the payback was enormous. And it's gotten to where now the payback isn't really worth the season anymore. And most of the full-time for-hire boats that I've talked to, there are a couple exceptions, but the majority of the full-time for-hire boats are against having it and would rather have the better season in the summer. So that's pretty much my vote, is for the no February. Just do away with it. We'll take our reduction. Because everything's unforeseen. You don't know any of it until after everything's done, and it's gotten to be too much now. Thanks.
Thanks, Skip. Yeah, and generally our closures have been 2 to 3 weeks in length based on the February fishery. We had some people asking why in this poll we said a season closure of unknown length. That's because it is unknown. As of right now, I don't know how many fish people are going to catch in February. I also don't know how many fish people caught the last couple years during the regular season, because if for some reason fewer people went fishing, well, that means we'd have to close more days this year. It's 2 unknowns, so you know I can't predict it. So that was why I did want to make sure to say, like, it's not necessarily going to be the same closure we had last year. It could be less, it could be more.
Yeah, well, that's.
What are you looking for from us?
And Jeff, I'd like to add, I appreciate the work Alexa's done. The survey, that was well done. I think we ought to rely on that more. In the future, when we have the time to survey the public and formulate the answers, it helps guide the commission and the committees. One thing I'd like to say, that last year was probably the perfect storm. You know, we had 28-day season, fairly decent weather, and we had 1 option to closure. And I don't think we should do that this year. I don't think we should do 29 days, because it would be 29 days this year. Happy leap year. But I think something like you suggested, you went weekends, you know, 4 3-day weekends, which I think maybe we ought not to even do that. But I think we should have a season in February. I think some of these recreational for hire have an opportunity for a revenue stream in a season where they likely won't have anything else to fish for, togs maybe. But I think it's a value. I think it's wanted. And having a truncated season of only less than 12 days would be a whole lot better than the 28 days we had last year. And spread over the month, you're likely to have 1 weekend that's a blowout for weather. But you might have 2 or 3 weekends you might be able to fish, or you might have only 2. I don't know.
To demonstrate your point, this is the
The
number of
effort.
trips each day of the 4 February seasons. So you can see, especially in 2019, there would be a few days where there's trips and then no trips, and a few days. But in 2023, that's the bottom right there.
Good weather.
We had people going almost every day.
Good
That's
weather
going
and
to be
28
one of the
days.
reasons why our harvest shot up last year.
Alexa, are they catching their limit in February, most trips?
Pretty
It
reliably,
seems like it
yes.
from
I mean,
the
if
pictures and
someone
stuff.
doesn't tell me how many anglers are on a trip,
Yeah.
and it's a
then-
multiple of 15, I can guess.
Right, and then for the remaining portion of the season, are they mostly catching their limit as well, or not as easily?
Not as much.
So in other words, you're gonna have to give up more days, right? If you catch your limit,
Possibly.
have a lot of really pretty days, you're gonna end up giving away more days throughout the, okay.
That's possible.
Well, it's also, I think if I'd add, it's also based on when during the year you take the payback in the waves, as Alexa can explain. In wave 3, the May and June timeframe, you get the highest payback per day. In November and December, wave 6, not so much. And you
Yeah,
can
that's-
explain the difference, but your highest payback, and that's why July was picked last year, is you got the most bang for the buck. Of course, it's in the middle of the summer. So depending on how you address that federal reduction and whatever you catch in February, whatever season the commission decides, that will then have to be decided in April, how you're gonna pay that back. Do you look at more days in wave 3, or do you look at wave 4? You gotta come up with options. That's why in April, before the commission, if we can go back to the study, once we know what that payback is. We already know that the federal payback, it's, what was it, 13 days, 15 days, 12 days or something like that?
The required reduction last year was 11 days.
Well, I'm looking at the July 15th to the 27th. If you don't have a season, you're gonna be paying back 12 days right there in July. Or 12 days in June, it'd probably work out about the same. But, so, if you take a truncated season of so many days, and I'm not suggesting the 4 3-day weekends, I'm suggesting a little less than that. But, you have potentially less to pay back. And if you have more options, then you can perhaps minimize the amount of impact. Because we can't do, as Skip referred to, we can't do what we did last year. 28 days, huge season, good weather, and then have to eat the whole thing at one sitting. We can't do that. It's not fair to the recreational angling community to do something like that. So I'm looking for any option we can do to get people fishing, minimize that payback, but you still have to pay it back.
As to your question, Jeff, this is a presentation to the committee, results of the poll. If the committee wants to make a recommendation, the commission will hear it. If the committee wants to say, yes, have a season, no, don't have a season, if the committee wants to say, have a season but weekends, the recommendation is yours to make. And all that happens is we present that to the commission when I present all the information you saw here.
Either one.
I was on one of the charter boats last February, and it was incredibly huge fish. We had 7 citations, and we
It's
caught
good fish.
all the fish on the rocks around the wind turbine. And we were done in half the time, and it was nonstop great fishing. And they are bigger, I think they're bigger fish in February than they are in the summer.
We'll put you on the promotional posters, Mike.
In a sea bass outfit.
But it was really cool that they were on the wind turbine.
Love structure.
Okay.
Question, the poll, how was that given? What medium? How was it collected?
We sent it to, how was it distributed or how was it collected?
Yeah, distributed. I mean, how did you seek out the target audience?
So we sent it to the committee and asked them to send it to anyone they wanted. We put it on our webpage and we put it on Facebook.
Gotcha.
I believe we shared it twice on Facebook. We wound up towards the end having a spike of activity, so we even extended the survey a little bit to get kind of those people who grew aware of it at the end.
Okay, we need to tell her what we think as far as, should we have it?
You want to do public comment? Public comment.
I'm sorry. Public, anybody wish to comment on this Black Sea Bass season in February?
And before, to tie into what I said, and you know, when you look back historically, and I have a soft spot for the party boats, especially, and the charter industry. I did that for, it doesn't matter, a long time. The people that they take, especially skipper, a lot of them aren't in the fishing clubs. They don't have their own boat. They don't have a boat that they can charter one day, and if they don't have a charter, they can go fishing themselves. You know, they just don't have that level of lifestyle. So, you know, I think that there's, and I can't sit here and give you a number of how many are missed, but, you know, I would have to say that there's a group of society that relies on party boats, especially, to go fishing that probably wasn't, you know, didn't have a chance to probably, you know, speak here. And I think that's what Skipper, you know, we would look at him to speak for them. So that's just something that we need to think about. You know, those anglers that the only way they get to go fishing is on a party boat.
Well, that's
So-
especially true for this season, because February, everyone's going offshore. A lot of the private anglers don't have boats that can do that. Weather can be a little iffy, so people might want to go out with a more experienced captain, which again leads to charter. In fact, the February fishery is last year's, well, for the whole period, about 55 to 70% charter harvest.
Sure.
And that's way more than in the regular season.
And I don't want to get into this, but it goes to another, you know, whole discussion, and this is what they're seeing up north, and this will probably play out in the striped bass. You're gonna hear this, is the proliferation of charter operations since 2020, since COVID. You know, the entire population has had a wholesale philosophy on life change since COVID, and they're gonna pursue every dream they ever had. And for a lot of people, that was being a charter boat captain. So it's unbelievable how many people are now charter boat captains that never were before. So those aren't exactly the people I'm talking about. I'm talking about the tried and true, 100% income charter boat operators, you know, which are not as many, but carry, you know, just as many, if not more people. Because when they're running, they're running. You know, they're not chartering one day and fun fishing 3 days, and they're 27 Grady. So, but, you know, I don't want to alienate anyone. We want to be accepting. But there's a segment that's not being spoken for here, other than people like Skipper Feller, you know, who take them and need that larger fishing season, you know, to catch their fish.
Would a show of hands for who's in favor of the February fishery suffice?
That works.
We have
Some,
Show of hands.
we're gonna make and there were 3 options: no season, full season, or a truncated season.
If anyone's for the truncated season, we can take that as a vote as well.
I have a question about one of your graphs, the ones where you had catch per day.
I don't.
You had a catch per day graph.
Yes, I did. Well, not catch, trips.
Trips per day, that's fine.
Is that the one you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, that was
Is
number of
that-
trips.
Is the big numbers modulo 7?
I'm sorry?
Are the big days always the weekends? If the big days are always the weekends, giving them just the weekends
Looks like it.
on many of those years is like, just open it up. Because hardly anybody goes the other days.
Oh, that wasn't quite true last year.
No.
On the
Well,
bottom
that's why
right.
I'm asking if it's modulo 7, if those are if those are Saturdays and Sundays.
It looks like that might have been true in 2020.
Probably a factor of how many sick days you have at your company. But,
Let's back up. A show of hands for people who want limited number of days, weekends.
About limited number of days, fully open and fully closed. Does
Mr.
that
Chairman,
cover
what I
all
was gonna
options?
recommend or move that Alexa put out a survey for 4 3-day weekends for 12 full days of fishing in February. What I'm recommending is that you do a Saturday and Sunday over 3 weekends, and on the federal holiday, I think it's the 19th, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. That would be 9 fishing days only in February for 2 things. One, to give a revenue stream to some of these charter operators who want to fish during that season. 2, limit the number of days that we have in the month so we don't end up with another 2023 type season. And 4, so that it would lessen the amount of payback, hopefully payback, by only having 9 days on the weekends when most people would fish, and eliminating those other days. That's my recommendation to
I
them.
consider that a motion.
I move that we recommend to the full commission a season in February that consists of 3 Saturday, Sundays, fishing days, and 1 3-day fishing weekend of the Saturday, Sunday, and Monday that coincides with the federal state holiday in February, for a total of 9 days only in February.
Do you have a second?
I second that.
All right.
Let me, quick. I'm writing out the motion to make sure we accurately capture that.
While we're discussing this motion, I'd like for you to put your chart back up.
I'm afraid I can't because I'm currently on another slide.
Let's go back to the calendar. I can get my calendar 2021. He can give us all.
Does that work for you?
It's a question of,
Recommend commissions of 3 Saturdays, Sundays, and 1 3-day weekend over the fall. Yeah, 9 total days. 9, a season of total of 9 days cumulative during the month. Because again, I can't see 29 days.
We
We
should
set
also,
ourselves up for disaster.
we should also have a vote on no February season and a vote on standard February season, which is week-long. So when you vote right now, it's to people who want to vote for this motion.
but, okay, so now put your chart back up for 1 second. I just want,
Remind me which chart you wanted?
the ones that had the trips per day. So what I look at when I see that chart is the 3 days in the top right chart that had a lot of trips probably added up to all the other days in that month. Exceeded all the other days in that month. And it's the same kind of concern with the 2 days that were really big in the bottom right, as compared to almost all the other days added up. Those 2 days made up the same. And my concern is, and we did this in, I want to say it was 1994 when they reopened the striped bass season, and they did it 3 days a week because it would make it so that we could not harvest so much. And they just pushed that fishery all into those 3 days, and everybody went on those 3 days and went to work the rest of the week. And if you do it for a limited number of days, I predict that you're gonna get, if the weather cooperates at all, you're gonna slam them on those days and gonna get not much the same, which is exactly what happened on the bottom right and the top right. Now, the one on the left top, that one's kind of an averaged out, not many trips per day. And again, the top right one looks modulo 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, top right one is modulo 7.
Summers can correct me, but I believe Joe Grist just said February 24th, 2021, which is that second big peak, was actually a Wednesday.
Okay,
So it must have been an especially nice weather day.
yeah.
I got a fishing fleet.
I agree with Tom on that. I think you're just gonna jam it in.
Yeah.
If you give them weekends and holidays, I think you're just gonna force that many. boats out there.
Unless the weather's bad.
Unless the weather's bad, I do agree. I think it's gonna.
Well, what we can do is take a vote on the motion. If the motion passes, great. If it fails, we can do a show of hands for yes, open, or no, closed. Does that work for everyone? All right. I don't think we had any public comments. All right.
I'd like to comment, this is Ernest. I'm kind of again, if you look at the chapter 23, you'll see that the peaks are every 7 days. So that's a weekend. The 2 biggest peaks more than make up for all the other days put together in that month. So you're not going to get the reduction you think. I'm more into it for fairness. A friend of mine is a charter, well, I got quite a few friends that are charter captains, but they're like me getting older. The fact is that it's basically a Virginia Beach fishery now, and everybody else has to pay back. The friend I was alluding to had to cancel a load of sea bass parties last year because they were closed down because of it. So I will be voting against the motion.
Okay, thanks, Ernie.
Thank you.
All right, a vote on the motion?
Yeah, call for vote on the motion as it's written. All in favor, raise your right hand.
I'm a firm no on this.
So that's 3 yes.
Okay, so that's 3. The motion fails. So then do we just want to do a show of hands, yes open and no closed? All right, so hands for yes, open the full season. 1?
That's the full February.
Yes, full February. Any online?
No.
Okay. So 1 for open full February, and then to keep the February season closed.
I'm a close.
That's 3 online.
All right, so that's
Did you get
nine total for February closed. That includes the people online. All right, thank you. With that, we can move on to recreational summer flounder measures. So this year, we're gonna be setting specifications for recreational measures for 2024 and 2025. The 2023 stock assessment found that the stock is not overfished, but overfishing is occurring. So the population is not below the threshold, but we are taking too many out. So the coastwide commercial quota decreased 42% from 2023, but because of differences in allocation, Virginia's commercial quota is decreasing 32%. And the coastwide recreational harvest limit decreased 40% from 2023. So to figure out what kind of percent change, change we have to take, we're using something called the percent change approach. This is only our 2nd year doing it, but something that was agreed upon by the Mid-Atlantic Council and ASMFC. So the way it works is we compare the recreational harvest limit to the expected harvest by MRIP for that year. After that, we also take into account where the biomass sits in relation to its target. If it's a higher biomass, we might not need to do as much than if we had a low biomass. And then we compare those to a table that will find a percent change in measures. And then after that, we set management measures to achieve that percent change. So for step 1, we compared the 2024-2025 recreational harvest limit to a range around that harvest estimate. We know MRIP doesn't get it smack on the dot, so we put a range around it. So the harvest estimate for 2024 under 2023 measures was 8.88, and the range was 8.1 to 9.48. But you can see the recreational harvest limit was 6.35. That's 28% lower. So when we take it to the percent change approach, and I'm going to take it column by column because this table is a little overwhelming, the recreational harvest limit is less than the lower bound of the expected harvest. So there's the yellow box around that bottom one. In other words, we expect the RHL to be exceeded. When we look at biomass from the stock assessment, we can see that summer flounder's biomass is low. It's below the target, but still above the threshold, which is how we found it's not overfished. And based on that, we have to take a reduction of a percent difference between the harvest estimate and the RHL not to exceed 40%. So because that difference was 28%, we have to take a 28% reduction. If we were 48%, based on this table, we'd stop at 40. But since we're below that at 28, that's our reduction. And with summer flounder, we follow conservation equivalency. So a single set of coastwide measures can be replaced by state or region-specific measures. In regional conservation equivalency, which summer flounder does use, states within a region propose a consistent set of management measures. So Virginia's in a region with Maryland and Delaware, so our summer flounder measures will always be the same for recreational. And staff will calculate the measures needed to reduce harvest within that region by a given amount, which are options I'll be showing you in a few slides. So for how this works on the timeline, in January, the regions will submit preliminary conservation equivalency options to ASMFC. The technical committee and board will review them and decide what to accept. If there's any proposals that maybe don't make the full accounting or that ASMFC believes don't work, they can not accept those proposals. On February 1st, the Southern region is going to hold a joint public hearing online. When we have more details about that, we will send it out to the committee and then advertise it on our website, just so we can get information from all of the region's anglers at once and hopefully come up with an option that pleases the most number of people. In March, the regions will submit their final conservation equivalency proposal to the board and TC for review. ASMFC will certify to the National Marine Fisheries Service that the proposals will achieve that 28% reduction. And then at our April commission meeting, the BMRC will vote on the new recreational measures. And again, these measures will be for 2024, 2025. So right now, our status quo is a size limit of 16 inches. It was 16.5 2 years ago. We were allowed a liberalization 2 years ago, so we decreased the size a ½ inch. We currently have a 4-fish bag limit and a year-round season. So all of the following options increase the size to 17 inches right off the bat. Option 1 has a 4-fish bag limit and closes the season September 21st. Option 2 opens the season May 8th and then runs through the end of the year. Option 3 has a 3-fish limit from May 2nd to December 31st. So essentially, by decreasing the bag limit by 1, we gain 6 days. And then we have option 4, which maintains a year-round fishery by having a 2-fish bag limit from January 1st to August 10th, and then a 4-fish bag limit from August 11th to December 31st. And now I will say that these options are being presented to you before we present them to the board. So hearing them, putting them into place does pend ASMFC approval. So again, if the committee wants to make a recommendation about a certain option, if the committee wants to rank options, that's an option. But also we will be having that public hearing on February 1st, where we'll be receiving the whole region's opinions at once. We're probably not going to throw options out at this point. These are options we have put together with Maryland and Delaware. But welcome to hear the committee's thoughts ahead of time.
Okay, anybody?
I have a question about an option that, can you move like option 3 back a month? So it's like April through end of November?
Yeah.
That's something the committee would be interested in?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. When the Eastern Shore, I mean, this is
Yeah,
gonna be.
we've thought about that.
Yeah.
I mean,
You could
this
move that,
is-
if you could move that back to April 1st to November 31st or 30th, whatever it is.
In April,
Because you get an early season where they come in and they're in the shallows and the rivers I fish and around the bridge tunnel and stuff.
I'm just talking about
Slug that comes in.
I'd rather go with option 4.
I don't know what it would look like because there's a
There's a
plug it. I have to plug it into the computer and let the computer
Yeah,
run
and
it.
even-
But if the committee's
even-
interested
even
in that, I can
maybe-
look into
even
it.
maybe pulling it back to November 15th.
yeah, because I'm gonna tell you, the Eastern Shore is gonna be devastated. Hotels, motel, I mean, Quinby, Wachapreague, Chincoteague, Ernie can, I mean, you're gonna have, if there's even anybody left over there, that will travel and speak, it'll be.
So my
does that usually
my
start?
suggestion that I think has support is you move it to like April 1st and then tell us when the close date would be to do that.
April 1st fits with what you were thinking, Chris?
I think we need to hear from some people, but yeah, it would help. I mean, their season kicks off in April,
March.
you know?
In March even.
Yeah, I mean,
Is going up
March
a bigger
15th.
fish an option? Can you get a year-round season, we're going to 18 inches or something? 17 and a half, can you get?
Is,
I don't think most people catch more than 2 fish. And,
yeah, you can see changing the bag
4.
limit doesn't do much, until you get down to that 2 fish. Like there was no option that would allow for a 3-4 bag limit split for a year. That was why we had to go 2 and 4 for option 4.
I'd like to go with option 4.
Okay.
Do you want to vote on that, or how do you want to do it?
Does the committee want to vote? Or just, yeah, I mean, we can take comments.
Well, don't worry about Virginia Beach, they have other things to do. I mean, I hate to say that, but these people in April, that is it. I mean, they can get away, like Tom said, on the frequent time we do agree, Tom. We agree often. But you know, they got trout and drum November, October even. But I mean, April, that's like, it's a big deal over there. You know, the flounder season kicks off, their tourist season. You know, the black-capped gulls and the cherry blossoms and flounder. I mean, it's just.
What about March?
March 15th is.
I think they could give up 2 weeks in March, but to give up April would be just, I mean, I can't explain to you how devastating. Lewis, I mean.
It certainly was. I don't know if you've got the number of tournaments and have the folks coming in for it, but some people, that kind of routine never dies.
It never died. I mean, that, yeah.
The weather or the flounder fishing's poor, but if there's no season, you're right.
It would be an unreal economic hardship over there to lose April.
What about, would they buy into 2 fish for that season?
I mean, I think it would be interesting for y'all to do an outreach, I really do. I think as much as you did for the sea bass, I mean, I really would feel, you know, I feel, other than just lifetime experience, I don't have a dog over there, you know, I sense it, I've seen it, you know, but, yeah, I think, of course, they'd love 4, you know, I don't know, it'd be interesting to see if we could do April through November or April through October and see what that gets us. You know,
I can run it, see what that gets us. I can shop it to my counterparts in Maryland and Delaware,
I
see if
think
they're on
even
board.
they might even, because they get the same kind of people in the spring, you know.
Well, and I know my counterpart in Maryland goes to the Eastern Shore in the spring, so
Yeah.
he's probably on board.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you floated that, you know, it would be, no pun intended.
Mark, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I agree with Chris. You know, I mean, you know, we need to have it earlier season than, you know, there are a lot of smaller fish over here. You know, I don't know the savings or whatever, but I think you really should look at, you know, an earlier type situation. So, that's my opinion.
Okay, so I'm hearing the committee wants to see an early season closure that opens in March or April, and there is support for the year-round split bag limit. Is that accurately accurately?
What does that mean, year-round split bag limit?
So option 4, where it's a year-round fishery, but there is a split bag limit.
Fish for the first half of the year.
So it's 2 fish until August 10th, and then 4 fish starting August 11th. That was the only way we had to maintain a year-round fishery.
It just seems to me to flip that would make more sense, because in the early part of the season, you're only catching flounder, so the 4 would be nice. To go to 2 fish later, it would be you got other variety in your bag, and the fish are bigger, you know?
John,
that would be
agreeing or
palatable if we could
disagreeing?
switch that.
What he's saying.
Go to 4, January 1 through August 10th, or March 1 through, you know, whatever, yeah.
Whatever that date is.
I'd like to see March 15th as well as April 1st.
Okay.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I have time to run some more options. Like I said, I'll shop them around to the other states.
You're saying, do you have time? What kind of time frame are we looking at?
A week from tomorrow, we have to submit our options to ASMFC. So
there's not time.
once they're submitted, we can't, that's it. So those will be the options that will be presented at the hearing on February 1st.
So
Bigger
what is
fish
this
coming in.
option you're talking about, redrafting? I've
So
heard
do,
April, I've heard 15 March, I've heard
Yeah, so-
year-round flip, that, you know, what,
so a season that 17-inch size limit, 4-fish bag limit,
right?
beginning March 15th, one beginning April 1st, and then another option that revises option 4 to start with a 4-fish bag limit. See how far we can go with that.
Yeah, because there
Those-
is
those
plenty,
are the
there's
three
plenty to fish
additional
for in
options I have.
August and September.
Right, to fill in the rest of this,
Yeah.
yeah. We've got an unbelievable puppy drum fishery.
All right, any more thoughts? Any thoughts from the public? All right, any thoughts from anyone online we didn't get?
Really appreciate you looking into that.
No problem. Okay, is that it for summer flounder then, on the committee? All right, our next topic is blue catfish. I don't have anything to present on this. This is something a few committee members have brought up about wanting to talk about. So I'll open the floor, and I can answer any questions for Virginia's management on, VMRC's management on blue catfish.
Any issue can.
Thank you.
Ordinances are small.
Just for an interesting data point is Virginia caught in 2022 2.2 million pounds of blue catfish. And the electric shocking is clearly the most successful method to do it, in that 3 electric shock permits caught 700,000 of those 2.2 million pounds of fish. The catfish pots caught a significant amount, and the pound nets caught a significant amount. The rest is more of a bycatch from gill nets during rockfish season. The Potomac River, with only 35 watermen targeting blue catfish, caught 3.3 million pounds. So, in a much smaller area, one river, though it's a big river. And there's a lot more catfish that could be caught, but the restrictive piece of it is that there's a restriction in the regulation for the blue catfish. And that is with one gear type, which is the electric shock. And with the electric shock, there's a maximum size of 26 inches. So in a way, if we are way past the point of trying to eliminate a species, but if we're trying to do any kind of control, throwing the spawning females back for the sake of the charter boat industry, it just doesn't make sense to me. And no other gear type has a size restriction except the electric shock. And I can't remember his name, but I talked extensively to the Game and Inland Fishery, now Department of Wildlife Resources, on why this regulation is there. And it's there because a group of charter boat captains in the upper James River want to protect the larger trophy fish, and I understand that. But from a strict dollar standpoint and an economic part of the bay, when you can read so many studies about the damage that these catfish are doing to our other fisheries, it just doesn't make sense to protect spawning females in all 3 rivers. The complaint or the goal from the charter boats is to protect them in the James. So at the minimum, we should be able to open up with no restrictions in the Rappahannock, Mattaponi, and the Pamunkey. So my proposal is to absolutely eliminate any restrictions in size for the electric shocking. And if we have to negotiate something in the middle, let's just make it for the James River and draw a boundary line up somewhere that the charter boat guys could select. It just doesn't make sense. We are fortunate to have George down at the end of the table, who's absolutely the father of electric shocking, and he certainly has caught the largest amount But the other two, Chris and the Mattaponi Pamunkey and Dave Johnson are really restricted. Dave and George were, this summer up in the Rappahannock, and first, because of our drought, they had to go all the way up to Port Royal to find fresh water. But now with all the rain we've got, I guarantee you these catfish are migrating back down. But the amount of large fish that they had to let back in the Rappahannock River, it was huge. I went on to Rappahannock River bass clubs, and I invaded their website, their Facebook website, and I asked them all, do you have any issues with protecting these larger catfish? And unanimously, their answer was, get rid of them all. They are hurting our bass fishing up here. So at the minimum, if we have to acquiesce to game and inland fisheries, let's do it for the Upper James and open up the Rappahannock and the Pamunkey. And so that's my piece of this.
So I will clarify a few things. I do have here the breakdown of harvest by gear. Electrofishing takes 12% of our annual on average. Far and away, our lead is.
12%, 3 people.
I mean, the Hall Seine has similar catch per person. And as far as
catch per gear, not person, it's 6 or 7 people on a Hall Seine rig.
per reporter. And as far as regulations, just like DWR defers to VMRC for, shad, we defer to them for catfish because catfish is a freshwater species that comes into saltwater. So you can see surrounded by the yellow box there, in the James River and its tributaries below the fall line, the Rappahannock, York, including the Pamunkey and Mattaponi, below the fall line, you can only catch 1 blue catfish per day longer than 32 inches. So there is that restriction on all of our commercial gears who are fishing in those waters.
Yes, so federal.
And then any other river below the fall line, there is no daily limit.
So
But in those 3 tributaries, it's only 1 blue catfish per day longer than 32 inches.
And Alexa, I guess this is steeped in the Virginia Department of Health consumption advisories.
Most likely.
That's 32 inches is their advisory limit.
Yes, but that's only for the James River. Only. I have it right here in front of me. It's only the James River has a 32-inch, do not eat. Blue catfish over 32 inches, only for the James River. It does not apply to the other tributaries. I mean, I'm not opposed to it as a commercial regulation of 32 inches, okay? But I'll just point out that the consumption advisories from the Department of Health don't reference the other tributaries as a 32-inch max size blue catfish. It gives you a no more than 2 meals per month or something like that, like they do for almost every species. But they also include the flathead catfish. Are they regulated commercially? Because there's no regulation for us for them.
Only in electrofishing because we kind of group.
They
those
group
species
catfish,
together.
all catfish, blue and flathead?
I believe you're only allowed to take blue and flathead. We didn't want people taking, say, the white catfish, which have very low numbers right now.
So,
The native catfishes, which
I get the restriction, but I can only find it in the James River for 32-inch blue catfish. It wasn't referenced in size at any of the others. The other thing I'd like to point out is that we have a seasonal limit for blue catfish of whatever the days are. George, you can perhaps help me out here. But why? If it's done by salinity and water temperature, then let that be the determining factor and open it up year-round. The anglers, the commercial watermen know when they can fish because of temperature and salinity. Let them have it. Don't close the season early in the fall if you have a warm fall and allows them to fish more. A lot of rainfall, warm temperatures, means they can probably fish another couple weeks. Let them fish. Let the seasonal environmental conditions, which they look for, let that be the guide. And lastly, no commercial limit on blue catfish harvest. Just open it up.
Yeah, let me, George.
Let the market set that.
Didn't you get a warning or a ticket from the Marine Police for having too large a fish?
No, I never have.
Did Dave?
Not that I know of.
Okay. So it's 32 inches and not 25?
26, you said.
26.
It's for electrofishing. All other gears defer to the DWR regs of only 1 over 32.
Did you see what I cut and pasted to you guys in an email when I raised this issue that I cut out of the regs that showed the 26 inches?
From the electrofishing regulation?
When,
I mean, I don't have I can pull up the regulation if people wanted to see it, because we also built in a tolerance to allow some amount up to 28 inches.
Correct. Did we look at those regs?
and when we're looking at them, I seem to recall that we set an upper bound for electrofishing on the James at least. That they can't go past a certain point.
That's
Yeah.
all of the,
And that was put in place because of the charter fishermen who wanted the large fish, and I think that was a reasonable compromise.
Yeah, exactly, Tom, but why does it apply?
And the other thing, in support.
I can't pull it up.
And another thing to support the harvest of this 26 to 32 inch fish
I can't
is
get it on the screen.
these blue catfish eat detritus, is that the right word? Detritus, when they're smaller. They don't eat other fish and crabs and stuff like that much when they're smaller. When they get big, 26 inches for example, that's when they start predating on finfish and crabs and such, and soft crabs and
Herring,
such.
Shad.
And if we're gonna try to do something to work on the ecosystem effect of these guys, we need to be harvesting that slot, the up to 32 inches. I don't think above 32 inches, but that is to me because of the health effects.
In the
So what
James.
you're saying is do away with the,
No, make the limit, the commercial electrofishing limit, up to 32 inches, below 32 inches is legal.
Okay, I wasn't able to pull the regulation up on the screen, but I was incorrect. It shall be unlawful to take, harvest, or possess any blue catfish greater than 25 inches in total length, except up to 12 blue catfish per trip may be between 25 and 28 inches in total length. So that does not include the flathead.
Any 19 of the James River.
Are you gonna let,
That's all of
talk?
them, anywhere.
Mark Sanford,
Okay.
Mark, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I got a couple of general questions. Number one, what is the market for commercial asking for? And I think probably George would be, are they looking for a specific size fish?
So I've spoken to a few, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead, if you want to answer that one.
I've spoken to a few processors. They say for fillets, they prefer a 3 to 8 pound fish. That's why we chose the 25 inches. We've been talking to people at VIMS who do some of the surveys that catch blue catfish, and they say it might be a different size for the 8 pound, maybe like a 1 or 2 inch difference. So that's something we can look at. But the processors say they prefer a 3 to 8 pound fish.
They prefer, but will they still buy a bigger fish?
The bigger fish,
Yeah.
I
There you
understand the
go.
bigger fish are harder to process.
They will buy them.
They pay 50 cents for anything over 3 pounds and 25 for anything under 3 pounds.
And how big is that fish?
Okay, so there's,
And they'll take them all.
so there's a price difference in the size of the fish.
So,
They're saying more or less the processor. And, my other question is, okay, you have 3 permits for electrofishing, and the question, I have is, to me, that seems like a very, very efficient fishery, which can basically take large numbers at any given day. And why are there only 3 permitted people that are allowed to do it?
We started at 3 with the intention that we can scale up. And that's something staff has been talking about, staff's been talking to DWR about, something to look into.
You really can't
Okay,
go behind
and
yourself. And
the follow-up on that is, with Maryland, I think declaring, and I read this and I could be totally wrong, they're asking for more or less of like a disaster relief funding for blue catfish because of being an invasive species, and a problem with other fisheries. What's, the Virginia standpoint of that? Is that true, number one? And I guess, I want some information on that, and I'm not really sure, what's going on in Maryland. Is that correct?
So just this past week, the federal government denied their disaster request. I believe they said the change in the other species was too gradual, I think, to be called an emergency. And I believe it was difficult they could not pinpoint the blue catfish as the reason. I believe that was the reason. I believe that was the reason it was denied.
So,
Right, okay.
in the interest of going home,
Thank you.
I would like to make a motion.
I'd like to hear from the audience.
Yes, if there's somebody from the audience wants to.
Would you like to, you seem to be interested in this topic, would you like to comment on the blue catfish?
Yeah, I'd like to know who they are.
All right, thank you for the invitation. So my name is Margie Whitmore. I'm the Tidal Rivers Fisheries Biologist with DWR and am the catfish expert in the state of Virginia. So I did just want to comment on a few things, as we do represent the recreational fishery, which is conservatively estimated about 70 million annually in economic input. And I say conservatively because that doesn't take out into consideration the indirect inputs from people traveling to the state for a trophy fishery. I also want to go into some of the area closures, and I know, George, this is old hat for you. We've talked about this quite a bit. It's not just the trophy fishery, which is why some areas are restricted. It's a safety issue. You have a bass boat tearing around a corner in Powell Creek, and you come upon a 2 to 3 boat operation. That's a disaster waiting to happen. So it's less about a trophy fishery and more about just a safety issue. The only other thing I really want to touch on is I know a lot of folks have brought up larger fish. There is a human health consideration with the larger fish. It's also proportionately the proportion of the population that is a large trophy fish, even though they are big and they do carry, more eggs. That is a much, much smaller contribution to the spawning biomass because there are so few of them that I'm not saying it's negligible, but it does not compare in any way to the spawning biomass in those 3 to 8 pound fish. And I mean, we've had population assessments that look at different regulation changes, and that includes, just removing these sub 25 centimeter fish. I'm not gonna convert that to inches in front of a crowd. My fast math isn't that good, but removing those small fish, because they are the biggest percent of the population, does have the most impact on reducing the population. So it's a little bit human health, it's a little bit spawning biomass. What we see the trophy fishery as is the best of both worlds. We get to keep this very economically important trophy fishery that keeps people coming back to our region and spending money. And then it also kind of minimizes the impact of blue catfish on our native species. The other thing I want to bring up is, impact to commercially important fisheries. We did recently start a movement ecology project that tags blue catfish, follows them throughout the James River. We do know that they're spending time in brackish water, and there is overlap with commercially important species like blue crab. We have not seen any of our largest tagged fish move downriver. So the small fish and the medium fish are the ones moving downriver to feed on those seasonally available resources. And so these are preliminary results. We're obviously following this very closely, and we will be communicating these results. But right now, what we're seeing in the data is that our current management priorities and recommendations are in line with an overall reduction in blue cap biomass, as well as maintaining the trophy fishery. So I can take any questions, or I can sit back.
What are you calling downriver on the large catfish not going down there?
Burwell Bay and below. Yeah, so that's not, kind of considering the different life stages in blue catfish. We are seeing them
So
primarily.
you're talking like salinity like the bay?
Yes, yes, yeah, and I know there is different, illegal hailing, some, overlap there, and, I know that's a salt wedge that shifts and is very dynamic, so that is definitely painting with a broad brush. We do also have partnerships that give us access to receivers in the bay. We do know that these fish can ride freshets out of, the rivers and disperse to other areas. So we would get detections on our fish if they happen to do that. And now granted, this is a subset of the population, but because of how we set up our sampling design, we are able to make population level inferences, and this is a 10-year project. So, what will be really interesting is to see how this rain is affecting, movement, to see if we see any movement out of the James River. But again, this is something that's gonna really help us get at the dynamics of overlap with commercially important, other species and native species like alocines. And it will also give us proportionately, how many of these fish, and it helps us to estimate the impact on blue crab. So it helps us to get at those numbers a little bit more, whereas right now we're looking at estimates that have really wide confidence intervals because we don't have the best population assessments.
So would you be in favor of a size limit raise in Virginia or no?
That's something that I would have to talk about with supervisors, for sure. I don't really want to answer for that right now. We are always happy to talk about, different changes because we do acknowledge that this is a problem, but we've also seen with the low-frequency electrofishing fishery, looking at our time series data, we have seen a consistent decline in abundance. And we've also seen about an 80% drop in citation fish over the past 10 years. So we really saw the peak abundance and the peak of the big fish back in 2010, 2012, and it's been declining ever since. And so we are approaching with caution. We don't want to make huge changes that are going to collapse the fishery because at this point we do have a lot of investment in equipment. George can speak to the amount of investment that goes into supporting a boat, running the gas. It's not cheap.
I'll also add, if I can, that part of our, we work very closely with DWR on this. And we went to their offices when we were proposing the electrofishing, and we had a whole room full of recreational trophy anglers and charter captains ready to get up in arms and say, you can't do this, you're gonna take all our fish. And we said, listen, by letting us take the small and medium fish, it reduces competition that allows them more trophy size. And then they were all on board. We even had some come to the commission and testify in favor of opening the electrofishing. So it's a way to reach a middle ground between the recreational anglers and the commercial anglers.
But the small fish and the big fish have a different diet, so it's not the same competition.
Yes, but the big fish that are shifting to piscivorous, so in the James River, we know that they shift to piscivorous, which means they start eating, fish and crabs, et cetera, at 500 millimeters. Help me out.
20 inches, more or less.
Thank you. So that's when they start eating fish, and those are the size classes that we're not really seeing move too far downstream. And I know there's going to be a lot of observations of that happening, and that's to be expected because this is a subset of the population. But what that tells us is that's not a huge proportion of the population that's doing that, and we do have 10 years to kind of make those observations and kind of make those estimates accordingly.
So the data that I would be interested in for trying to understand this would be the distribution of the sizes in the population in the
Yeah,
different
and
river
we
systems.
do have that, and I can send that to Alexa.
If you could send that out to the committee so that we could see that.
I've seen 250 plus pounds on top of water at one time. When things is right and everything comes up, I can keep 5 to 10 40-pound fish on top of the water for miles, steadily coming up and going down. So it's plenty of big fish.
Right, but what I'm interested in is the impact of the 26 to 32s.
It would be a big help just to go to 32 inches.
Yeah. And my motion I was going to try to make was that that's what we try to get staff to look into trying to do, as well as expanding the fishery within reason, because as you said, and we've talked about this in the past, you go to one place today, I think you have to wait 3 days, 4 days to come back?
4 days to be effective.
Right, to be effective. So you can't have but so many people in a river system doing that before you start getting really grumpy with everybody else.
It's definitely a limited entry and it's controlled by VMRC.
Me and Manhattan catch together. when I could jump from river to river and have somewhere fresh every day to go. So,
George,
Yeah,
what
I
about,
do- oop, sorry.
what about not having being limited by a season? By,
the season they got is right on track, because,
It was based on your
yeah,
data.
I mean, I don't think it's a week one way or the other that we could do it.
I mean, but my point is, why have one if it's environmental conditions that you fish for?
Right, the seasons they got are perfect pretty much, because we never go past it, and really can't start before either.
So, yeah. So one of the things you said earlier was that the population is stopped growing so much and is being reduced. And your predecessor, who I guess retired, what, 10 years ago or so? About 10 years ago?
Bob Greenlee?
Yeah, Bob Greenlee.
That was 5 years ago, because
5
I think
years
one of
ago.
his last things before leaving was,
10 years ago, he told me, well, you watch these blue catfish. Their population, it's a common thing when you introduce an invasive species. The population explodes. And then it gets to a certain point, and then it starts to collapse and gets to an equilibrium at a lower level than it did at first. And I'm wondering if part of what's going on is that.
We have seen a fairly characteristic rise and fall, and that's when we're talking about the peak in 2010, 2012, that's what that is. It's essentially, falling consistency from there, a few peaks, a few valleys, but.
Yeah, and so what I'm saying is that that's not necessarily because of fishing pressure. It's just a natural flow for that until it gets leveled out, and then we can start saying what's going up and down is fishing
Well,
pressure.
I would say that blue catfish have an amazing ability to compensate for competition, and so what you would see is also a size collapse within that population. So if they reach, a certain density, then you're going to start seeing like a collapse in the size as well. So that would be kind of the threat of falling below like a commercially viable fish as well. And at that point, there wouldn't be much of a market, but I feel like that's a little, maybe too far.
No.
Yeah,
We're used to wonky talk here.
Yeah, so we've recently kind of shifted our sampling design, so I don't want to get too far into methods, but we were kind of using a fixed station design that was kind of oriented towards, higher density aggregation sites, and that's looks at relative abundance, and we've seen that really declining. We did recently shift to like a hybrid fixed station random design that makes it allows us to do basically more complicated math. And so we'll be working with people to kind of look at the dynamics between the size structure and abundance across the whole system. And that will give us kind of a better idea what's going on there. But from what we're seeing, we're just seeing like a really sharp decline of those big fish just because of the increase in number of the smaller fish. So there's just more competition there. And the fear is that, they'd shift to just spawning earlier at those smaller sizes instead of reaching bigger, more commercially viable sizes. So that's the one scenario.
Okay, thank you, please.
I know we're running late, I just have one more set of things.
Are you gonna let people in line talk?
In a minute.
Yes, Mark, right after Mike?
Okay, thank you.
Is your study,
I have my hand raised.
your research is primarily in the James River?
Yes, it is. So because we have, just historically, a lot of research has focused on the James, so that was kind of a good place to start because George also is, consistently on the water, and, we have more consistent catch data on the James as well. So, the goal would be to get this same idea of what's going on in different rivers because obviously they're all different dynamic systems.
Because it's quite
They
different
do-
in the Potomac and especially up in Maryland, who caught almost 3,000 pounds almost by accident because they're just getting used to, they're just figuring out how to catch blue catfish in Maryland. Alexa, on your comment about the processors, from Colonial Seafood Processors in Washington DC and McDonald, RJ McDonald and the other big processor up in Jessup, Maryland, according to the commercial fishermen at PRFC, who primarily fish the upper Potomac, their market is wide open for large fish. Now, 40 or 50 pounds, there's not much desire to take those, but 20, 25 pounds, the market is just as good up there as it is for the 3 to 5s that are further down the bay that you're talking to. On the safety thing, ma'am, when the regulations were first put in place, non-electric shocking on weekends was specifically for the purpose of safety. So there is already a safety thing built into it. George, Chris, and Dave can't electric shock on weekends for the safety reason. But I'm gonna keep pushing this because I think that it makes sense in the James River to have the restriction because there's a charter boat industry there, but that charter boat industry doesn't exist in the other rivers.
Mark, you had something you want to say?
Yeah, my first question was, you were talking about salinity level and fish movement, and I was just kind of curious to know how far down do the larger catfish move, number one, and how far up do crabs move when they're in the smaller size? Because I think there's a lot of scientific evidence that's not out there, and I'll tell you, I'm not going to sugarcoat this one bit, but blue catfish is an invasive species, and we need to do any and everything that we can to slow the spread. And I think it is detrimental to the blue crab fishery, number one. And we've got a lot of smaller crabs that move up in lower salinities that are immature, and the catfish are eating them, number one. So, I've got a problem with this. I think we need to expand the fishery. We can talk about trying to save the blue catfish all day long, but I think the reality of it is, blue crabs, rockfish, or striped bass, whatever you want to call it, are important also. And you got to look at the economic value of those fishes also, not just the recreational blue catfish.
You kind of faded out towards the end there, Mark. Are you still going?
Mike,
Mark, are you still there?
would you like to make a motion? Something that we can pass on to the VMRC?
I've seen crabs all the way to the 295 bridge.
Yeah, the easy answer on how far out crabs and catfish go is 100% dependent on salinity. This summer, we had record salinity in the bay, and the blue catfish stayed way up the rivers, and there were Potomac River crabs caught in Mount Vernon. So now, with our salinity already having dropped 25% and dropping further, we're gonna have blue catfish all the way down to Point Lookout, Maryland. They're gonna be down all of the rivers this summer because our salinity has dramatically changed from last year. So it's all salinity based, but I would like to make a motion.
Okay, is that all right with you?
I'm ready for a motion.
All right.
Motion is to eliminate all restrictions on blue catfish for electric shocking. And if there's pushback from the James River charter industry, we do a demarc line in the James River, and no restrictions exist anywhere else in Virginia waters.
Mike, I'd like to add that there is a regulation we need to keep with regard to in vicinity of gear types and activities in the water.
I mean, all size restrictions, okay?
And seasonal limits?
Size restrictions. The warm weather takes care of the water temperature. By the way, for electric shocking to be successful for everybody, it's got to be 70 degrees or up, pretty much. So,
Pretty much.
And you just
All
want
right.
it for electroshock, you don't want it for pulsate or all gear
Well,
type?
the other gear types, as we said, are beholden to DWR regulations, and that's not something we can change. So does this accurately represent your motion on the screen?
Will, did I get it? Because you just.
Yeah, where I was going was I wasn't wanting any seasonal restrictions other than the environmental conditions, and the watermen can decide when that is, as well as the harvest limits, let the market decide. So if you have a warm fall and a low salinity in any of the 3 areas that they fish, they can fish if they want. Not close the season to allow them to decide, let the market, the watermen, the 3 electrofishing watermen, decide when they can go out and fish and how much they can harvest. Let the market
I
run.
agree with that.
Okay.
Add that. So,
I don't know, George, what is
George,
that?
you okay?
It may not be but a week or 10 days, and one season it may be 3 weeks that you can fish if you wanted.
Yeah, it might, I mean, a little warm.
Are we limited to 3 electrofishing fishermen by
See,
regulation?
I
At
only
this
speak
time,
to electric
without-
because I don't know a lot about the other gear types. So,
At this time, it's 3, unless we change the regulation. As I said, it's something staff is discussing internally and with DWR.
yeah, there are no restrictions for any other gear type, Will.
okay.
Calnet, Holocene, Cox, Gillnet, none.
Yeah, I only focused on
Have a-
electrofishing. But,
You said that the other gear types are covered by DWR,
or the harvest amount.
whatever.
Yes, DWR, which
DWR.
says in the James, York, and Rappahannock tributaries below the fault line, you can only take 1 fish over 32 inches
Why doesn't that apply to electroshock fishing also?
because they're capped at 25 with a tolerance of
No,
28.
no, I mean, but with what this says is remove all size restrictions, and I believe what it should be is, to be consistent with what you just said for the other fisheries, is below 32 inches.
If we took all size restrictions out of the regulation, they would also default to DWR regulations.
Of 1 fish
So
over
you're
32.
telling me that a Holocene commercial waterman cannot keep a blue catfish over 32 inches long?
They can keep 1
Per person.
if they're in the James, York, or Rappahannock.
Is that per person or per vessel?
I
bet you it's per
believe it would be
person.
per person.
Per license holder. So if you have 2 licensed commercial watermen, they could keep 2, yeah. So if that's what's going
I would
on,
say, let's eliminate that too, because it doesn't exist in the Potomac and Maryland. And I understand the charter boat guys in the Upper James, but it doesn't make sense anywhere else.
Well, that's not something VMRC can do.
Can I just chime in for a second? We cannot in good faith allow the harvest of fish over 32 inches when there's an advisory on them.
Agreed.
Okay? Plain and simple. If there's a
PCBs.
fish advisory from the Board of Health, we're gonna adhere to that.
In one place, all right, just the James River.
And there's a consumption of no more than 2 meals or 1 meal a month.
we have the
But
same thing for striped bass, though.
Yeah.
And white perch, and flat catfish, and striped bass, and there's that same restriction or recommendation in just about every species of 1 meal or 2 meals per month. So I've heard the commissioner say
That
this
was
many
before my
times.
watch, so.
Try no crabbing in that same area. Try that.
Say that again?
Try a regulation that says no crab pots can be put in that area of the James River because of health reasons. I mean, that would get big pushback.
Huh?
Crabs and fish aren't the same, I don't know if VDH has a health advisory for
Here's the-
those.
VDH has a health advisory in an area of water. And
We're gonna create our regulations that the best we can support those advisories. So maybe that 1 fish over 32 inches ends up being 2 meals a month.
Well, if we can get this motion, I'd be tickled with that.
Mike, do you want to limit, you still want the 1 fish limit in there? Or do you want to insert the word
Sometimes
bag?
getting a little bit is a lot better than
Well,
getting
you
all.
want to insert the word bag behind size? So agree, all blue catfish size, comma, bag limits and season
Do you
restrictions?
think we can do that motion here? Absolutely.
We can do whatever we want, but I don't think it's
That's
gonna.
not something VMRC could
Yeah,
affect
the
because it's
commission
not
is
set by
permitted
our
to do that.
agency.
So I would, my friendly amendment would be, eliminate all blue catfish size except for 1 per licensed commercial fisherman over 32 inches. So, no, you're capping it 1 over 32, which is what the current regulations
Basically
say
saying you
allows.
can take all the 31 inches you want, and you
Yes.
can take 1 or 32 inches, but only 1 over 32.
Is that amenable to the maker of the motion?
Is that's what we're meaning, is that you're now saying you can take a blue catfish up to 32 inches all day and one over 32 inches. Is that how I understand that?
Yes.
Is that what we're saying? That's DWR's regulation.
Yes. So
And
even
that
if
would-
we removed all size regulations from VMRC regulations, that would still be in place.
Because the way we wrote it there, except one fish.
No, that would
No,
still
because
need to
it's
be-
DWR's regulations and they regulate blue catfish.
It's somebody else's regulation that VMRC can't change.
Just like they can't go and change the striped bass regulations on us.
Is there a daily
Mike, is this
harvest?
change amenable to you as the maker of the motion?
Sure.
Is there a daily harvest limit, George? A daily harvest limit?
How much can how much
Say
can
again?
your boat hold?
How much you know? And an annual limit?
Yeah, we've seen some of your support boats going back and they're going pretty slowly.
Is there a quota that you can achieve, or there's no restriction on how many you can harvest?
Just the size limit. Kill 'em all.
We're interested in increasing capacity. We don't have any daily quotas.
Should we mention above and below the fall line? Do we need to mention the fall line at all here?
I think that is in the DWR regulations, so I think we're okay.
All right, everybody in favor, raise your right hand, please.
You're right. Your right hand, John. Yeah, that's right.
10, Summers? I'm sorry?
There's none online.
Okay, so
I like
that's,
one.
oh, one?
One online.
Okay, so we have 11 for the motion.
I agree.
Anyone in opposition?
Thank you.
All right, no one in opposition.
Just a note, years ago, Doug Jenkins, who was a member of this panel, brought in a catfish and was complaining vehemently about how many small crabs these things eat. He split it open in front of us and there's so many contents and showed us the crabs that existed.
I have a picture of
Mary-
that still if you'd like it.
No.
Mary Fabrizio at MIMS just released a study last year that took a segment of the James and counted the number of catfish, estimated the number of catfish and their consumption of crabs, and it's a lot.
This summer, 2 100-plus pound blue catfish were caught in the upper Potomac.
Mark came back on, but he texted me, he'd like to ask for an increase in the electroshock fishermen.
Okay,
So I just want
yep, as I said, something we're talking about.
Okay.
Staff has to go back. and
Anybody else in the audience have any comments? Thank you for yours, appreciate that very much. All right, any new business to come before the committee? Guess not. New items from the audience? Any comments on things we haven't discussed yet? Do we have a next meeting date?
You'll be here, if the commission votes for a February black sea bass season, then you'll be hearing from me in March to discuss a closure.
But please attend that February 1st joint meeting with the rest of the states regarding the summer flounder recreational fishery.
When we have that information, we'll send it out to the committee. And we'll be advertising it, as we usually do.
Do we have a motion to adjourn? Second. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you very much for all your help.